Right, good evening everyone. Welcome to the first meeting of the second year of Community Environment and Partnerships. Particularly welcome to all the new councillors, and as I said downstairs, an even greater welcome to Councillor Tony Jones, who I think is the only member of the committee from last, and Councillor Mark Taylor, who've both come back for another year. So welcome to you two, and Councillor Day, I hope, will be joining us later. Right, there are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening, so if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and side of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. The meeting is being webcast, and officers have checked that the microphones all seem to be working tonight, and it's being webcast live on the internet. And please, can all members and public switch their mobile phones off or to silent. Apologies for absence and substitutions. We have Councillor Laura Edwards replaced for the evening by Councillor Joe Smith. Declarations of interest. I have one. I am the Council's nominated representative to the board of Basingstoke Voluntary Action, who are mentioned in paper B. That's a I don't get any financial benefit out of that, and they've not contacted me to make any representations on this item, so although I need to declare the interest, I can still participate in the debate. Are there any others? Councillor Bound.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have to declare a pecuniary interest with the Youth Services paper due to my employment with Rooksdown Community Association, and a non-pecuniary one with the discussion regarding LIF applications, because I'm leading on the one on behalf of Rooksdown Parish Council.
And as I understand, you'll be withdrawing for the one where you have a pecuniary interest.
I will, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Golding.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a non-pecuniary interest in the paper B as well, because I am the Council's elected representative for the Young People's Information.
Thank you. Any more? And Councillor Gardner.
When we get to the transport paper, I have a non-pecuniary interest as a member of the Dial-A-Ride Management Committee from this council.
Thank you. We're done. Okay. Right. Aha. The next item on the agenda is appointment of vice chairman. So, are there any nominations? And I think unless the gentleman who's just walked in is prepared to be nominated as vice chairman, there aren't any. That's a definite no, is it? All right, this is it. So there are no nominations for vice chairman. In that case, I agreed beforehand, because I can't watch who's putting their hands up and write. Stephen will do what would normally be the vice chairman's job of keeping a note of who've put their hands up when you want to ask a question or speak at the appropriate time, and I'll have to remember to look left rather than right. Minutes of the committee meeting held on the 11th of March. Those who were here then, are you happy with the minutes? In fact, committee, are we all happy that I signed them as a true record? I'll do that at the end of the meeting. Good, thank you. Yeah, Councillor Jones. Do you want to put your mic on, please?
Page 9 of 11 on the bottom there, about the works programme. It should be added to the works programme, this food and garden waste. It would be added to the works programme, was what was agreed. It's not on there.
Okay, the officer says he can add that on.
Yeah, lovely.
Right, appointments to single issue panels and working parties. The nominations of which I don't think we need to formally have nominations and seconders, so the people I'm aware of who have been indicated to me would be willing to be on the tree appeal single issue panel. I've got Councillor Mrs Tucker, Councillor Paul Frankham, Councillor Hussey, and Councillor Nick Robinson, because it doesn't have to be members of this committee. That's 4 out of 5. Is there anyone else here who wants to be the 5th person or would like to nominate a 5th person? Hang on. I've just seen Councillor Gardner waved a hand. I would be quite. I was trying not to have 3 Conservatives out of 5, although it's not politically biased, and I had another Conservative ahead of you. but I was hoping to get one more from the other side.
Mike is staying on there as far as I know.
Councillor Westbrook, who was on it, and he spent his life in trees, so he was definitely worth having. So, right, good, okay. So that's that fixed. Tucker, Paul Frankham, Hussey, Robinson, and Westbrook. Climate Change Panel, we were a little less clear as to who wanted to be on that, but the three names that I've got are Councillors Pearce, Mrs Still, and Miller. Is anyone aware of anyone else who would like to be on the Climate Change Panel? And if not, perhaps, Councillor Hussey, you'd like to make the suggestion you made downstairs.
I propose that should any names come forward at a later date, that we delegate the authority to the chair.
You okay that if I can add to the name of people, if we get some more names coming forward, so let your friends know we'd like another 3 people for the Climate Change Panel. Right, motions referred from Council. If the Councillors Harvey and Cousins, who are the proposer and seconder, would like to come up to the chairs, we'll let the portfolio holder introduce it, then I'm sure you both want to speak, and then, as I said to Councillor Harvey at the beginning, if you'd like to stay in your seats once you finish speaking, because this is not a debate about the substantive issue, it's a what are we going to do next, but we might want to just ask you a question when we've had our very brief discussion as to what we're going to do next. But Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, following on from the motion from the last council meeting, we have been investigating, and we've been in touch with Solent and also with Southern Health to find out a little bit more about mental health, the Concordat. It seems that this has to be signed by the Chief Executive and not by myself. So on the 19th of June, an officer and myself have been invited to the workshop which will take place in Winchester, which will be all the members that make up this team will be there. So what I intend to do is to sit down and to talk to them and to find out, one, what benefit will the Concordat have from us signing? And I have no objection to signing it. So I think we need to look at a few more facts and figures, put together a paper and then present it, both have a discussion with the chairman and advise the chief executive accordingly. But at the moment we need to find out a little bit more. We have been in contact with 2 members of the team and we're getting conflicting information from them. So I would like to clarify and clear up about 3 points that have come forward. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey, I'm not using the timer, but please don't.
Well, don't worry, I don't need all the... Can I welcome what the Cabinet Member has just said and say that I think in terms of at least our understanding, the Head of Paid Service in relation to the CX role fits in with that, so I understand where that's coming from in terms of signing something on behalf of the organisation and how the organisation would then respond to this. I mean, as far as we're concerned, I mean, we see the Concordat and have seen it in other places as being an incredibly positive agenda. That's what it's about, and it is about joined up working and it's about best practice. So those 2 elements are what we'd like to see brought to the table in this. We know that's going on in other agencies that are operating in and around all of the spheres and all of the fields that would be associated with supporting people with mental health. And in that context, I think we can and we should sign up to it. There are, I don't think, any barriers to us doing so. And I think it will also be welcomed by many of the local agencies, particularly those that we've spoken to, in bringing this motion to council in the first place. The one thing we picked up that was very relevant was the issue of the way that cuts faced by many of the services in and around supporting people are placing increasing pressure on vulnerable people in our community in a way that we need to understand how our services fit into that. And that's also part of the work I know that other Cabinet members are going through. But here particularly in the housing sphere, and again discussing this with particular groups who are involved, they see this council's role as a housing nominating, in terms of management, in terms of all that the housing team do, is just one particular example of where us signing the Concordat would be hugely beneficial to joint working, partnership working, and the work that the other agencies do. And that was commented that, you know, if you guys sign up to this, it would make an incredible difference to the work that we do in this housing area. And that was just one particular example that was picked out to us. So yeah, I think it's very relevant. I welcome if we're going to have a paper come back. I think that would be incredibly informative to then take it on to wherever it can go. And if it turns out that we cannot sign it for whatever reason, there's nothing to stop us partnering and being involved, and I'm sure the Cabinet member would agree with that, because even if we can't formally join up with the Concordat, the services we offer is what the agencies have been talking about. It's the actual relationships. So that was where we would like to see it go anyway, but the Concordat simply just reinforces that in that way. Thank you.
Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to echo what Councillor Harvey has just said. We believe that signing the Concordat would be a fantastic thing for our council to do. Would show our residents that we take mental health and wellbeing incredibly seriously, and that we're willing to do wherever possible what we can in order to assist those people. Just pushing on further, something that the Labour group perhaps think that CEP could have a look at in terms of what else we could do with mental health and wellbeing is certainly in relation to councillors and front of house staff, safeguarding training could be made compulsory. We believe that regular dementia training from Dementia Friendly would also be of incredible value and of use to councillors and also to front of house staff. And finally, something that we would like CEP to consider is a Safe Places programme. There's a programme that is run in Dorset where people with mental health and learning difficulties can approach shops that display stickers if they're in distress or they feel scared or nervous. That shop becomes a very temporary hotspot where that person can contact a person and get the help and assistance they need. It's something that we believe CEP could have a look at for us. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mrs Austin.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I failed to say that the third officer that's coming with us is from the Housing Department, because we had notice about the vulnerable people, so they will be coming. And I will check, but I am under the impression that we already have a crisis centre sort of thing here, where if anybody is in distress, the staff are trained and we have a special officer to look into it. So I'll make sure that people know and are made more aware of this. Thank you.
Councillor Loney.
Sorry. Thank you very much. I think it's really important. I recently attended a Supporting People meeting here, and there is £500,000 to be cut, as in lots of cases, for the mentally ill. And obviously they were talking very clearly about housing within that, and having housing very much similar to, they talked about the refuge where people can stay for X amount of time. And the idea is to speed things up, as opposed to years ago when we closed Park Pruitt. I was the officer, if you like, on behalf of Stonham, who housed all of those that were in houses of multiple occupancy. And I think one of the things I'd like us to consider when this does happen, when we're looking at housing, that each councillor knows their area better than anybody else. And one of the things that I found when we took these houses in multiple occupancy is that when people are very vulnerable, there are always other groups who are much cleverer, and they, if you like, they use that intellect to misuse the vulnerable housing. We had, and there's not going to be a lot of support in the housing that we're talking about, and we had a lot of support because there was lots of different money. It was when Park Pruitt closed, there was a lot more money, and so therefore a lot more hours. But even with the amount of staff that we had in those housing, we were found to have, goodness knows how many times we had to call the police in to remove the amount of drugs that were being stored in the vulnerable housing, because the vulnerable people weren't aware that they were being abused. They assumed these people were being nice to them. And so what I would ask, when it comes, if it comes, to us looking at housing, that the councillors for the areas that they're going to perhaps be placed in are asked for their views about vulnerable areas. And I'm sure we all know where there is a lot of alcoholic problems or whatever. And I think it's really, really important that the councillors of this borough are involved so that they give the advice that only they can know for their ward. So I'd please ask for that. Thank you.
Turn your light off, please.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right, that's okay. Right, now I think I mean, the point about putting this on the agenda is with council motions is it's our only task tonight is to decide what we want to do about this in the future. Now, if I've understood, and this is why I've left you guys there in case you know, kick about, as I understand this, the direct point of the motion was to sign up to this Concordat. It's a matter for the Chief Executive rather than the Cabinet. There's a workshop coming up very shortly, after which the portfolio held and the officers will be able to prepare a report. If the result of that is that the Chief Executive is happy to sign the Concordat, I wouldn't want to slow that up by bringing it back to here. And so I think we only want that to come back here if for any reason it can't be signed up. On Councillor Cousins' wider points, which are well worth addressing, we now have a work programme suggestion form which people are encouraged to fill in, so we have a little more definition before we start this work within committees. So what I would encourage you to, and we already have relatively full agendas potentially for September and October, but I would ask you to, I mean, I guess there's an electronic version so you can expand on it, because you'd never get all that in this tiny space of a piece of paper. But could you complete that? I think it would be probably a sort of thing it would be worth us doing, and then we can consider getting a scoping group together. And I don't think there's anything that requires scoping groups to be made just up of members of the actual committee. So if you make it clear when you're putting this in if you'd like to be involved in the scoping, I'm sure Councillor Loney will want to be involved as she's spoken. So if we handle it that way, we'll fix which. It looks likely that if we pick it up, it will be the December meeting, right, because September and October. But as I say, I think the Concordat, if that can be gone ahead and signed, we don't need to slow it down by bringing it back here in September. So is everybody content with that? All round? Okay, thank you very much. So now, as I mentioned in an email that you should all have seen, I want to bring forward item 11, the strategic approach to local infrastructure, which results from a council motion originally by Councillors Gavin James and Councillor Parker, I think. And Councillor James is here to make sure we behave ourselves and take it seriously. And although you've not put yourself forward as a speaker, if you want to say anything after we've had the presentation, feel free. So we have a presentation. We have a brand new portfolio holder in our midst. So welcome, Councillor Tate, in your new role. It's a reward for all those substitutions last year. I think you probably broke the world record for substituting on committees. So over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. As you mentioned, the presentation this evening is a response to the motion which was raised in Council, which will appear as if by magic shortly. There we go. Okay. The motion makes a number of points, and the report that you will be given tonight is at a relatively high level. There is a reason for doing that, which is to provide a level of understanding of where we are today, and some of the background as to the Local Infrastructure Fund, and we'll conclude with an idea as to find a way forward, how we can build on where we are today in the next year. So in that I'm relatively new and relatively unfamiliar with some of the topic, Leslie is going to take you through the presentation, and then I'll conclude with some idea of the way forward afterwards, if that's acceptable to you.
Right, if I can make this work. Yes. Okay. On the basis that not everybody is totally steeped in LIF, we thought we'd do a quick recap about what it's about, how it came about, and just bring you up to speed with where we are to date. The LIF scheme was actually the product of discussions with a members' advisory panel back in 2013 and agreed by full council in October of that year. An application process and documentation were prepared in line with that cabinet report and was launched very quickly after that approval in December 2013. And the main focus for the scheme is actually around capital projects that make significant long-lasting impact on local communities which benefit or relate to areas of development that have accrued new homes bonus. Now, I've read that word for word because we repeat that, and that's the information that's on the website. And that's really what it's about. So we'll expand on that a little bit as we go through. Applications can come in from parish and town councils, community associations, constituted community and voluntary groups, and from our own ward members. This was very much seen as a tool for that community leadership piece, and that's really where it was targeting. The criteria is actually, and always has been, set out on the website. We've tried to give as much information as possible, and we certainly make sure that we follow up, and if there are any queries, we try and expand on what that looks like, because the criteria isn't hugely detailed. It's quite broad in scope. But what's set out is that it is targeted fundamentally at capital projects, although revenue schemes will be considered on an exceptional basis. Applications are really intended for sums over 25,000. That was always the remit from the start, though you'll appreciate lower applications have come in, and they've also been considered on an exceptions basis. There are other grant schemes within the council that deal with infrastructure. They've been around for some time. They include the Leisure Facilities and Community Buildings Fund and the CHEF, which I won't expand on, but I think is to do with Heritage and Environment Fund. And the intention was never to duplicate that or overlap with that. So that's a conscious decision whenever we're looking at applications. But you'll appreciate there is some commonality when communities are driving what they're looking for in their area. A fundamental part of this is that the fund shouldn't substitute for any funding obligations through Section 106. So prime concern at every juncture is to check, have we looked at that first and dealt with that funding? And obviously, as it goes forward, SIL will be part of that process as well. A key tenet is that we look for evidence of community need. It's not just a wish list. We are looking for something that shows that there's a need in that area and that the community are behind that. So community plans, neighbourhood plans, or an existing policy or strategy, preferably, if we can look at those to help support any application that comes through. And a key part, as we've mentioned, is that it's in conjunction with a local borough councillor. We ask that all applicants, wherever it's coming from, have discussed the application with their ward members, and that feedback, if we don't receive it as is required through the application form, we will also seek it, and that will be put into any report that's going forward, so we understand where ward members are coming from on those applications. Obviously, in parish areas, we've also tried to seek parish council comment, but it's comment rather than any part of the decision-making process. The projects are normally required to be delivered within 3 years, and to demonstrate that they don't have any ongoing liabilities for the council. I mean, the intention is it is a set one-off piece of work. Just from a housekeeping point of view, and you'll appreciate later, and when you see the list that's circulating, there are a lot of enquiries that have been generated, and from a housekeeping point of view, it was agreed that we'd have 2 deadlines in each year that gave people a target to work towards to provide their information and a way of managing the information and making decisions. So those 2 deadlines are around March and September of every year. The process is really very much around looking at applications against that criteria and involving key officers, because you'll appreciate we have a number of teams that are working in communities or have some expertise in the kind of infrastructure that's coming forward, and wherever we can, given the broad scope of that, as an administration for that particular scheme, we wouldn't expect to be experts in all of those areas, so we seek the relevant officer support to make sure we understand how it fits. If it's an item under 250,000, it's part of a portfolio holder report. Anything over 250,000 is subject to a cabinet report. So that's just a little bit of housekeeping going forward. By way of background, where does the money come from? And not everybody necessarily understands this. It's part of a government initiative that came through and is based on supporting areas and communities that have benefited or have been affected by housing growth since October 2009. And for every new home that's built and occupied, the council receives from the government New Homes Bonus Grant each year for 6 years. that's quite a significant programme going forward. We can't, and it's subject to government policy, so we can really only have an indicative feel for what's coming up, and we try and deal within the bounds of what's realistically either in the pot or there is good expectation we will receive. Up until March of this year, we had overall received about £11.5 million in New Homes Bonus. The council's policy for that, because that funding isn't ring-fenced in any way, is to split it three ways. 20% goes into the revenue budget, and 40% goes to strategic infrastructure reserve, 40% to LIF. So you'll appreciate there's a sizable amount of money that's already within that pot, £4.5 million effectively. Again, going forward, that is subject to government policy. We can't guarantee, but at the moment there's a reasonable expectation of funding that will come in, and it's dependent on any houses being built, the number of those houses going forward. Albeit, providing that policy continues, we still have an expectation over the 6 years for the housing that we've already received. So you know it's coming through. The funding that we have received is on the website as well. So there's an indicative table, so it gives people an idea of what is available in their area and what they could potentially be looking at applying for. To date, from the LIF allocations that have been made, we've spent approximately 1.4 million. With a further 149,000 that's earmarked from 2015-16. So there's a sizable amount of money that's been allocated to date. I ought to say, a key point really is if that continues, there's an expectation that we would receive a further 16.6 million up to 2021 in respect of houses built between 2010-11 and 2013-14. So again, a sizable amount of money likely to come down the track. But that allocation is again subject to the council's own policy and however we choose to spend that. What I've circulated, and hopefully whoever wants one's got a summary sheet of the applications received to date. We've had 4 application rounds, and we've had over 30 applications, the majority of which have been approved. A small number declined, and you've got just an overview of the key details around those. And there are a number pending final decision, if you like, or decision subject to a portfolio holder report that's also due by the end of this month. You'll appreciate from that list the range of schemes that we've actually had, and obviously the reports that we've put through do go to reasonable lengths to try and explain the background to all of those and tell the tale, if you like, of where it's come from and why it's important to those communities. But the range covers Tadley Youth Building, which is the largest scheme I think that has been approved and is now on site and started, which is 201,200, down to Stratfield Say Village Hall Boiler, which was 2,261, which was all that was in the pot for that particular area at the time. So there is a small number of applications that haven't been progressed, whether that's by the organisation because there wasn't sufficient information, or we've actually found that it was more relevant, it went through Section 106. So there's nothing really hiding anywhere. Because of the broad scope of that and the 4 rounds of application that we've had, there have been a number of issues that have been brought to light, and obviously what's triggered this motion is included within that. And a key element of triggering the motion was a couple of applications from town centre organisations that are, if you like, borough-wide remit rather than locally centred applications for something that's clearly impacting on the housing that's being delivered. There is currently 3.2 million or thereabouts still unallocated, so a sizable sum, and that's excluding the 15-16 uplift. So you'll appreciate the size of the project that we've got in the microscope at the moment. The scheme is intended for significant infrastructure projects. However, we frequently get a number of the applications that come through relate to what could be considered maintenance items. They're resurfacing, redecoration, items of equipment of various scale. So again, it's just a prompt that it's set out to achieve a certain thing, and the emphasis was on significant infrastructure. But when communities are coming in, they're looking for things that might be slightly out of kilter with that, I suppose. Again, we talked about evidencing need and community information to support that, and frequently that information isn't there. There are only a small number of community plans. Logically, it takes time for those to be worked up, and a small number of neighbourhood plans that are effectively finalised and working towards being adopted at this stage. So it's another area that actually is spending a lot of time working with the applicant to understand where it's coming from and how they're evidencing that background. So if I can just... the crossover with other funding schemes, although we try to avoid it, there's clearly a link. Some of the things that are coming through, which include refurbishing kitchens, maintenance items for village halls, clearly could go to the leisure facilities and community buildings grant scheme. However, there's no money in there at the moment, so there's a pressure to look at, well, why can't we use this? That can be very confusing for applicants. There's an array of schemes out there. Where am I supposed to go, and how do I deal with that? Again, there's actually large sums of funding available, and I haven't given you the funding table, but it is available on the website. But there are large sums available in some areas which often have already benefited from, or still have and will benefit from, large sums of Section 106. However, there are other areas or organisations that are coming through that could evidence some infrastructure need, but they wouldn't benefit from that at all. They're in an area that simply won't fit into that remit. And we know, and I think next week's EPH committee are also looking at some of the funding issues around local plan, that there are a significant strategic infrastructure funding gap, that ultimately there are some major items that need to be looked at, and it is probably useful to revisit all of those things together, and what is it we're trying to actually achieve with this policy, and how do we clarify that for everybody's benefit and make sure we get the most out of all of those schemes. So that's a quick run through, otherwise we'd be here all night without the detail. If I am back to...
Thank you, Leslie. The proposal really is that, and it's clear that the motion has produced a number of questions, and my feeling is it's an opportune time to review where we are at the end of a year's operation, and as was mentioned, there are significant funds becoming available through this programme in coming years, so that it's a very good opportunity, I think, not just to review in some detail, but also to look at those weaknesses and deal with them before we get into the next stage of development of the programme. So my proposal is that there is a members' advisory panel that meets during the summer that will report back to CEP. I would like to offer October as being a time that we can fulfil that obligation and deal with this in some detail and bring together some of the experiences that frankly I don't have, because I haven't been involved with this before, and many councillors will have either experience, indirect or direct, or views, so that we can make a good job of really reviewing this and putting it fit for purpose for the next period of time. So that's the way I'd like to see this to go ahead, not just as a report in its own right, but as the beginning of a set of work that will produce perhaps the real answer to the question that was raised in the motion, and take a strategic overview of this particular problem. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, both Leslie and Farhad. Now, that's a very clear proposal, which I hope will stay on the screen. We have 3 more very substantial items on the agenda for tonight. I'm going to give Councillor Gavin James a chance to say something if he wants to. I'm going to allow questions if you must, but can I suggest that if, by and large, we're happy that this needs more work, that we support the idea of a map, and that we'd like to have a proper discussion in October, that we don't spend time tonight saying things that could be said in the map and said later, because we do have lots else to get through. So, Councillor James, do you want to say something?
Thank you, Chair. Don't disagree with anything that's been said, and I think it's a good idea. The only thing I would say is there's a number of applications from town centre-based organisations that obviously we need an answer on what we're going to do with them and how they get funded and where we get that funding from, and whether it's all East Drops money used up as soon as possible, because we'd hate to delay some good projects. Also like to thank the officers for spending a bit of time with me since the motion, going through things. Their wisdom has been excellent. I've been reassured on a lot of things, and thank them for the scheme that obviously some great projects being supported. The real reason for speaking tonight is just I did tell my partner I was here tonight, and if I don't appear on the webcast, you'll think I'm in the pub. Thank you.
Excellent, man. I hope she was watching. Now, does anybody got a question or a comment they cannot keep to list? Councillor Loney.
Just a point for clarification, really. I see that the portfolio holder says an advisory panel. Does the advisory panel members have to come from this committee? The reason I ask is that I see there's an awful lot of money at Popley, and there's no Popley councillors here. Right.
The normal procedure is that once we decide to have a map, that someone attends a note to all the group leaders and asks them to nominate people from their respective groups. So it can be anyone from it's not strictly proportional, but we try and get a mix across the groups. Thank you very much. We will move on now. We have one more public speaker, and that's on relation to item 10, the commissioning outcome group and access to public transport. So in accordance with our normal practice, we'll take that next. If the buses officers, they're probably quite happy to have it next. So. Everybody's in place, so we have both portfolio holders, because transport is one and commissioning is the other, and we've been joined by Amy and Simon from the offices. So I think it's Councillor Ossleton who's going to introduce this, is that right? Thank you.
Fine, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Public and community transport in the borough. The report begins with a background on public and community transport in the borough and the level of investment by Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council. And it's just to remind people that the majority of these services operating in the borough are run on a commercial basis without financial support from a third party. Hampshire County Council is required under the Transport Act 85 to identify and commission socially necessary bus services which are not provided by commercial bus operators. And lastly, despite not having a statutory responsibility, Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council invest 717 per annum, in addition to the subsidised services funded by the County Council, to enhance the level of services provided within the borough. This paper also brings together three pieces of work, and that's the Borough Council's Public Transport Subsidy Review between July 2012 and February 14, the County Council's review of local bus and community transport services between March 14 and October 2014, and the work and recommended service improvements of COG3 between May 2014 and January 2015. it summarises the findings of the Borough Council's Public Transport Subsidy Review, details of the changes made to local services as a result of the County Council review. So we have looked in detail at these 3 pieces of work. This paper is asking CEP to note the work and options created by CO23 being progressed by the Head of Commissioning and Governance, and comments on the options available to the Borough Council for the future of the for the provision of the late evening pilot services, the 3B service, the 654 and the Winkelby shuttle. The late evening service pilot, since its inception, the late evening pilot service have had a total of 3,708 passengers across all of its 5 routes, and options going forward have been presented within Section 8 of the recommendations appendix attached to this main report. The 3B service, between January and May 2012, the 3B service pilot carried an average of 136 passengers per day. Evidence gathered during the pilot suggested that the more efficient timetable could be produced to better meet local needs, and options for this route are presented within Section 9 of the recommendation appendix attached to the main report. Now, the Winkelby shuttle, between January and May of 2015, the shuttle pilot carried a total of 286 passengers, which is an average of 1 passenger per day, equating to an average subsidy of £80 per passenger. And options for this route are presented within Section 11 of the recommendations appendix attached to the main report. Since this report came, we are now looking, and it could be discussed please tonight with the committee, that we stop the Winkelby shuttle, and a taxi share scheme could be organised to replace the shuttle and will be run as a pilot until the 30th of October at a cost to BDBC of £35 a day, and that's only when it is used, which will operate the same route as at a single fare of £1 where the concessionary fare pass is not used. So we need to look at that today, and this will help at least 2 or 3 people from the Winkelby area that do use it to go straight to the hospital and back again. 654 Costello School service. Between January and May 2015, the 654 service pilot carried a total of 5,875 passengers, and that's an average of 98 passengers per day. Options for this route are presented within Section 10 of the recommendation appendix attached to the main report, and work and options created by the COG, and to comment on the 4 pilot schemes currently in operation. Okay. Now, the options created by the COG that we will be discussing this evening.
So sorry. The COG came up with some 6 other options which have been put forward and are being developed. So first of all, the improved promotion of public transport. One of the key issues was to create a website similar to that which is used by TfL, and to cover all transport options within the borough. And this has been promoted, the various bus service pilots, and by the local media with websites and social media. That's been undertaken, and in some areas produced good outcomes, and others outcomes that need to be improved, frankly. The second option was that the Borough Council take budgetary control of public transport within the borough. Discussions have begun with Hampshire County Council, with no evidence of movement. So I'm sure that will continue, but it is underway and has been taken forward as part of the portfolio holder's work. One area where there has been some movement is improved cycle infrastructure. Not movement in terms of developing that, but the beginnings of discussion about producing a strategy document which takes that one forward. And the portfolio holder has had initial meetings with interested parties to begin to produce a cycle strategy in the near future. The improve local transport service and producing the appropriate infrastructure. Building the local transport structure into the local plan is a fundamentally important part of the local plan, and it's an area which is going to take some time to develop fully, but it is taken on board that the whole purpose within the plan is to provide jobs and homes within the area, and then transport is a key part of that to enable that to develop. So the local plan will begin to pick up the transport infrastructure and will become part of the process of developing the solution. The real-time information was brought forward by many people within the COG process, which is about understanding, knowing what's happening within the transport network at any particular time. And there are now 29 bus shelters within the borough which are showing real-time information. They're also some of them are now solar powered, so that they're beginning on a trial basis to use that as a technology. So overall, there is a beginnings of a move forward to bring information really to where it needs to be, which is in front of the people who are actually waiting and wanting to use the public transport. Finally, an annual local transport conference was an idea which came out of the COG. It's under, I won't say under investigation. There's a working group tasked now in the autumn 2015 to bring that to fruition. And the feedback, even from the last COG meeting, which was I think last week, was that this is a very positive development to bring together all parties, but not just the users, but also those who are providing the services, so that we can begin to build that into the annual life of the borough, and also take that on to providing feedback and opportunities within developing the strategy for the various parts of transport as well. So the COG process has produced not just short-term wins or short-term requirements, but also begins to take an active part into developing the long-term process of developing solutions within Basingstoke for transport. So that's a summary where the COG process recommendations are currently.
And we'd just like to say the comments are welcome from the committee members on the contents as outlined, and the final report will be presented to Cabinet in July. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Portfolio. Does Councillor Regan, do you want to come and have your say, please?
That's it. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak. I make no bones about it. I come to speak specifically about South Anne's bus services, notably the 3B, which is on the paper. The report, as the report says, the number 11 was withdrawn in January and the subsidised service stepped in. But we've got to go back a bit further. When February 2014, when Stagecoach reviewed without consultation and changed all the bus services, and actually in South Anne specifically, they changed what was the old number 3 route to make it either more commercial and shorter, which already worked for them. But it left the other third off my ward without a bus service. Irregular bus service, and another chunk of it without any bus service whatsoever. And this is an estate long established 2 miles from the town centre, and specifically the Berg estate was it. And the Stagecoach rerouted their number 11 Oakley bus to go through the Berg estate to give it an hourly service, where they used to have a 10-minute quarter hourly service. And that was never going to work. It was such far too long a route and irregular. So that, and out of the blue, the end of last year, the Stagecoach announced they withdraw it. And to give Councillor Austin's due credit, she called us in and told us it was going to happen, and consulted us, and come up with this subsidised number 3 route, which originally was just for a 3-month trial, and it extended to 6 months, and now it goes to the end of August. And as you can see, we've publicised it heavily locally, to use it or lose it, and you can see from the figures, the average 136, it is being used. I mean, I'm happy to talk about timetables and possibly routes, but I think the old principle what I'm asking you is support the keeping of the 3B bus service, because it is essential. It serves all the Berg estate with predominantly elderly population, and round another part of South Anne between, you know it, between Illview and Kipling and Kelvin Hill, which is predominantly lots of elderly people there as well, and people use it. And if they haven't got that bus service, they've got to walk down to Winchester Road and get a number one. Well, it's all right getting down here, or they can't get back up it. But for a lot of people, but also a lot of young mothers and parents with babies and such. But the number 3 bus service is an essential. As you can see, the unit costs are 10 pence below because of the usage. 136 is good. And I understand the commercial route would need 200, so we're not getting too far off it. So I would plead that, you know, it's keep the subsidised route going, and we might be able to get to get Stagecoach or another company to take over commercially, but not initially. We've got to build up a bit more. The evening bus service pilot, I'm disappointed in the figures for the number 3, but I think it's advertised enough. You know, I'm worried about that. How many people actually know? I'd liked the money spread to have to get people used to. I mean, the last bus to Southam and other areas is 9:30. Well, bear in mind, if you go to the cinema or the Haymarket or the Anvil, you won't be able to get a bus home. It happened to me a couple of weeks ago. So I'd like to see if we are going to look at the pilot money for that, it's actually spread to have run the buses about half hour later in the week, actually, like 10 o'clock, to get people used to have a late bus service. I mean, it's good that the late ones on Friday and Saturday, because they're tight in with the trains, but I should imagine most people going on the trains are jumping in taxis still, because they're not used to having buses there. So that's all I'd like to say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, Chair. Just to thank Councillor St and her team of Peter Smith specifically for the hard work they do on the bus services.
Thank you. And I may say we had a meeting the other day where someone was commending all the effort you've done to promote the 3B, so that's been recognised, so thank you. Oh. Right. Thank you. Committee, right, we will do this properly. Any questions? Now, you can ask questions by the portfolio holder, and if it's a tricky question, they'll get one of the officers to answer it. So, Councillor Day.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, Councillor Egan just mentioned about advertising. I mean, I've seen very little advertising of these evening bus services, apart from outside the malls, actually on the bus stop itself. I've not seen any, you know, I don't know if we've got a big budget or maybe we haven't got a big budget, but it makes sense to advertise the service either through the Gazette or through the Observer, or put it actually on the buses that we're running evening services so people know. I think that's my first point. Can I just ask, are we advertising on a regular basis? What are we doing? Is it on Basingstoke Radio, or can someone give me some answers on that, please?
Good question. We'll have an answer from somebody, please.
Yes, I've just said we do regular coverage, and our press office does help as well. Where we're having problems, but it is getting better, is if it's a commissioned service by Stagecoach, getting them to actually advertise. But we do the best we can with the budget we've got, and we do rely on our councillors as well to help and try and promote the bus service.
Supplementary, or is that okay? It's okay. We can come back to that in discussion if we want to. Any more questions? Yes, Councillor Smith.
Could I just ask, forgive my parochial on this, just some explicit clarification of what the alternatives are for Winklebury if that bus service can't continue?
This is what we would be in discussion with the ward councillor as well on this, and the option was that we were suggesting, after talking to the community transport services, that it was only one passenger or two passengers using it, that we would put on a taxi service at £35 a day. We'd only be charged if we used it, and you could take two people in that for £35, and it would cost you £1 there and £1 back, but it would take you directly to the hospital and back home again.
Question related to that, and was your question related to that? Because why is that sort of going to hospital not covered by dial-a-ride or community transport, which presumably cost a lot less than £35? There was an average of one person a day from Wengerbury, so you could wind up paying £35 a day. So why a dial-a-ride or community transport not the answer?
Take that one. They would be able to travel with the dial-a-ride service. if they fulfil the criteria. The problem at the moment is we don't know whether they fill that criteria or not. But the taxi, if we put the taxi scheme in until the end of October, that will allow us to do some more research with the ward councillors as well to actually see if those people, is it that they're not aware of the dial ride service that they could be using. So there's some work to be done there, definitely.
Have you met Councillor Smith, who is now a Winkleby councillor as well? So it's all right. I wasn't sure whether you made the connection. We knew the previous one. Councillor Jones.
Chair, just ask, is the spending in the borough higher than HCC's spending? When I read the report, I got the idea it is, and therefore should we not be approaching Hampshire County Council for the money they spend on subsidised buses to give to the borough, so we could actually decide where we wish to spend that money on the buses, rather than going through Hampshire County Council, having the arguments with them, and then coming back here and trying to persuade it. Is there any formula we can put forward?
I think there's a simple answer to that.
Yes, there is. That we would like the money, and we're trying to get talks with the Hampshire County Council that we look after the money and we decide what happens, etc. They were reluctant to do it, but we are still in dialogue with them, and it would be, yes, I agree with you, we would like the budget. Thank you.
They call it devolution, tell them.
Yes, and perhaps to save us having a debate, if everyone thinks that's a good idea, we'll try and remember to capture that as one of our resolutions, that we encourage the portfolio holders to continue that debate with our full support. So perhaps slightly preempting the debate, we can record that already. Thanks. Right, Councillor Huston.
It might seem I'm going off at a slight tangent, but if we're talking about promoting bus services, we ought to also be improving the waiting facilities. Many of the bus stops in my area, I've got requests in for bus shelters, but there is zero budget. The only budget that we have for bus shelters, it comes from developers' contributions, and if you don't have developers' contributions, you can whistle. And a bus won't come, but now when you get a bus stop, a bus shelter. So if we want to promote, why can't we extend the paper to include somehow improving the waiting facilities in all wards, not just ones where they've got developers' contributions?
Yes, that was a good point. When we had the workshop and Stagecoach came along, it was something they did mention, because some of the funding is from Hampshire County Council, and as I say, not from the borough, but they have taken that away with them, and we'll make sure that probably should come up, that they should be looking at the bus shelters. Yeah, I agree with you.
Go back to the slide with the full pilots on. Okay, so I think, because I like to do these things in an organised way, perhaps we could go one pilot at a time, and let's have people's views on the late evening services pilot, please. Just to make sure we're all up to speed, on page 66 of 111, the three options we're being asked to consider are commissioning the best performing routes based on the average borough council subsidy per passenger, which would be routes 1 and 2, but ceasing, notwithstanding Councillor Regan's elegance, routes 3 and 8, or continuing to commission all the routes as subsidised services, or withdraw all the services. So, views, Councillor Day.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think the late evening services should continue as they are in the whole package, and the reason why, we've only done it for 1 year, and those services can expect to have the volume that you're looking for when we look at prices there in 1 year. We've already talked about advertising, and although we are doing some, I still wonder if it's enough. But it takes time to establish these services, and certainly some services are, I think the taxi service is another one that is under review there. You know, it's a big area. There's over 20,000 people living out there. To cut them off from a bus service at the weekend seems not right. And Councillor Regan's area also needs to quite right. It's building, and we should let that continue to build, and we should try and make that popular so people use it. But we should do some other things, and this is why I'm disappointed in the COG. Can I make the point here? You know, why aren't we saying let's put some money more money into buses in the evening? And I mean Mondays to Fridays and weekends. But why aren't we encouraging our residents and saying the bus service is actually free? Perhaps the people might, you know, we're going to pay money anyway, so why not accept that it's never going to be a profit-making thing, because we know that no commercial outfit in the whole of Europe makes profit on its transport. They put money into it so people can get from A to B. And a big point I want to make here, we've got Waitrose going to open up at Christmas. They're going to employ probably nearly 500 people, I suspect, in jobs. Now, they're going to be open till 10 o'clock at night, so we're not going to get, you know, again, we cut off a large part of the population from actually being able to access A, the store itself, and B, apply for jobs, because they don't have transport. And there's been a failing all the time with us, because Festival Place, open till 8 o'clock, is there a bus out at 1? One bus an hour to everywhere until recently, and now we don't even have a bus after 9. Now, let me go back to Councillor Finney, when he stood up and talked about Basingview and about 15,000 new jobs in Basingstoke, which I fully supported. I could have actually joined you at that stage, because I was thinking, wow, this is fantastic. I'm really into this guy. He's got it right. He wants to expand Basingstoke. But what we've done is we've decreased, you know, we're 160,008 population with no bus service after 9. We really should be thinking, and I'm sorry, this is where COG fails, we should be thinking about the Monday to Friday services as well as the weekend services. I certainly support the late evening services, and some, and I'll leave it at that at this point in time. Okay? Thank you.
We'll try and draw some conclusions when everybody's had a chance to speak. Councillor Jones?
I would support them, because I think the one thing with buses, if people know that they run regular, and it takes time for it to get into people's brains, because not everybody goes out on a certain night, a different night, but if they know there's a bus to get home, they will get it. And I think after maybe a longer period of time, we can look at it again and say, well, is it working? Have we done the right things? Have we advertised it enough? You know, and as long as it starts to grow, I think we can take it from there. But I think at the moment we should leave it as it is and carry on with the pilots.
Councillor Gardner?
I think I would agree with those comments, that a bus service is essential in the community. I'm certainly in favour of Route 2, which runs through my ward, and I know that a lot of my residents will use it on an evening. As for South Ham, I think I would agree. The residents are there, they need access to the town, and we should keep that service going and encourage more people to use it. So I think that subsidy would then hopefully come down.
Councillor Loney?
It's quite interesting, because looking at Route 1, which is obviously Brighton Hill, and I think I made this comment when we had the bus service people come here to the borough, because most of our older persons' accommodation in Brighton Hill South is in the middle of the estate, and the buses don't go into the middle, they do the periphery. So the old people's bungalows, and I'm talking probably 40 bungalows between Schubert and Brahms, the buses don't come, and it's on a slight hill, and it's nearly 800 yards to the bus stop. So to be honest with you, I'm pretty sure if the buses, they'd only have to make one loop and have one bus stop between the two, just one bus stop, and I'm pretty sure that's not going to take too long for the bus to do a loop. I think the numbers would go up. Therefore, the subsidy will go down, because the older persons in this borough have got money to spend, and they want to go into the town and spend it. And it also, and I know I keep going on about this at different meetings, but the more the older person goes out, the less chances of the isolation and the amount of health problems that we get, because they meet friends in coffee bars, and older people on the bus speak to one another. Younger people might not, but older people do. And I just think there's so many benefits. So I'd like to, I did challenge the people from the bus service, but I would like to challenge perhaps the portfolio holder. I know that they're probably busy, but I'd love to meet them at Brighton Hill and show them what I'm talking about. One bus stop is all I ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just double check we know exactly what we're talking about with the evening service pilots? With what time bus and which days of the week are we talking about, just to be quite clear? It's the 9 till 11. It's the later bus than you were suggesting, Councillor Day. So it's generally what sort of time? So they're running from 9 till 11, but only Friday and Saturday. That's what I thought. Yeah. Okay.
I knew it was 9 till 11. I knew those buses.
Sorry, I didn't get that from what you were saying.
No, I talked about the 8 o'clock, you know, in Festival Place, people.
Yeah, but 11 o'clock is going to be late enough for shops closing. Yeah.
It's Friday and Saturday night. It's entertainment night, isn't it? It's people going out and having meals, enjoying themselves in theatre and cinema.
If I can have an observation as a member of the committee rather than as chair, I mean, I do somewhat worry when some of the subsidies per head are going to. I mean, when we get to Winklebury, I think that's unsustainable. But I do think, again, when we get to the 3B, I think that's very important to keep. But if you look at the figures for the 3B, the numbers drop off by about 16, 20. So certainly the Berg Estate people are not evening people by and large, not the ones who are using the buses at the moment. And if that's translating through to the whole of South Ham, I can see why the evening service is not proving very popular in Southampton. Now, I'm not against giving it a bit more of a go, trying more advertising, but I don't, you know, I personally don't see this as a long-term sustainable, that sort of level of subsidy. It really has to be, the evening bus, just like the daytime bus, has to be a use it or lose it. And I'm not quite sure that, I'm not persuaded by the argument that making it completely free would attract more people. What are the charges on the buses? Can I just again ask the officers to clarify what the charges are on these buses?
So the indicated cost moving forward is £90 for the 4 routes per day. So that depends. About between £2 and £3.
It's a flat £2 any distance. Okay, one way. Yeah. Okay. Well, youngsters as well as adults. Okay. Okay. Councillor Day?
Sorry, Chair, I have to correct you. All those places that have had free bus use have seen a massive increase in their usage of buses. And I'm sure that would happen in the evening, that people, as Councillor Loney just said there, give people, young and elderly, a chance to get out and go to bingo, maybe cinema, maybe theatre, and get back at 11 o'clock or maybe a little bit after, whereas currently Monday to Fridays we don't have the opportunity unless you get a cab. That's it. So, thank you.
It's an interesting point. I mean, I guess if I was the sort of person who went out during the day and had to pay for my bus, I'd feel a bit miffed if the late night people were getting their lift right over the bingo free, whereas I was having to pay for right over my after. But it's a the elderly get the concession. Yeah, okay. Oh, perhaps I wouldn't feel so bad, but there we are. Yeah, hang on. Just trying to, anyone who hasn't spoken on evening pilots want to have a say on evening pilots. I mean, the consensus is definitely we think they should all keep running for a bit. I'll say frankly, I don't see any case for stopping the Brighton Hill or the Borghurst and Tadley ones, which seem to be well used and good subsidies. Kempshott Park, my suspicion is the level of car ownership is very high at Kempshott Park, and that may explain why it's less used. But if we're going to keep Southampton going to see whether more publicity can generate more use, you should keep that going as well. But Councillor Jones was first, and then Councillor.
So I do support the idea of the pilot, but I'd like to put something in that Buckskin needs some evening buses as well. We have problems, but I don't want to take one from the other and have the argument round the table. So I'll put a marker down that at some stage we'll be coming to you.
Can I just, does the Kempshott Park bus go down Buckskin Lane?
I'll be perfectly honest with you, I'm no expert. I'm one of those terrible car drivers.
It does during the day, so I suspect it may not be the whole of Buckskin, but I think that probably it's going through. Someone else could check for us. And Councillor Hussey. Yeah.
Yeah, some of the routes are just not quite what people want, because we had this discussion with Stagecoach the other night.
I agree.
Councillor Hussey.
I agree we should keep the evening pilots going, but I'd like to see renewed vigour into the advertising.
I think that's, I mean, unless anyone else wants to speak against, that seems to be the consensus that we will report back, that we think the evening pilots should continue for the time being, but with attempts to improve the advertising, with perhaps some of, with improved advertising. Okay, but yes, improved advertising. I was attempts to get the message over was what I meant, improved advertising. But perhaps with the note that at least some of the committee, we don't like to quantify things, feel that some of this isn't sustainable long term if numbers don't pick up. But Councillor Smith.
Can I just ask for some clarity on how long we intend to extend the pilot for?
Is there a natural cut-off?
All supposed to be finished in August, but 2 of them had gone forward to October.
So yeah, just get a clear from the officer. This is by this is agreed with Stagecoach, yes. So before August we have to have another negotiation with Stagecoach. How long are they likely to want to regard it? You know, they're going to want another 6 months or something. We can come out in a minute. I'm just trying to work out what the minimum is. Yeah. Okay, the microphone wasn't on, but we need to be careful we're not slipping into procurement territory, which means if we're doing something that looks that we ought to be doing competitive tendering on, we will be in legal problems. But Councillor Hussey.
When did the pilot start for the evening? Sorry. Last August? Right, okay, thank you.
Yeah, to this August. So I guess if subject to the legalities, we were saying we think they should run for another 6 months. Is that the feel of the committee? There's a lot of nods there, guys, so that's what we'll put, you know, this is just our comments, which is what you asked for, so we're suggesting it. And Councillor Day.
No, I think it should be longer. I think it should be another year, because, as I said, unless we have a regular service, people won't use it. And you know, the numbers are building. Southam's already has mentioned that. Councillor Regan has mentioned that. So I think the longer we can pursue this, the better results that we'll have long term. Because you know, if we really are going to advertise this, and you know, there's lots of opportunities for advertising in Basingstoke, then I see that this could be viable.
Okay, could I? Just to comment that, of course, another 6 months from August is over 8 months from now, so it's quite a long time. So, I mean, unless people want to change their mind when they nodded to 6 months, I think we'll make the official view of the committee 6 months. Yeah. Now, does anyone wish to suggest that the idea of free services should be something we put forward as the committee? I'm sure the officers have been listening, but I don't think I didn't get a groundswell of support for you there, Councillor Day. So it's a good observation. I mean, but feel free to lobby us with some statistics from other places where it's worked. But it's I think for tonight we'll leave that as not something we've adopted as a committee. Councillor Gardner.
One thing that was mentioned earlier was Dial-A-Ride, and Dial-A-Ride do have services which run in the evening, which hopefully will continue. Which might be worth some people considering using those if the usage on the buses is going to be low, and that may actually be cheaper for them than paying the fares that have been quoted.
Thank you. Right, so we'll move on to the 3B service pilot, where the choice on page 67 is commission it as a subsidised service based on a revised timetable, or withdraw the service. And I have already indicated, given the numbers there, I think continuing it with possibly slightly less buses in the afternoon is a no-brainer. It seems to be very important, very well used, and yeah, I'll start by nailing my colour to the mast on that. Others, what do others think? Everybody, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm a pain tonight, but maybe it's just sat down there. I don't normally sit this far down, do I? So maybe I'm getting vibes from other people who are not here tonight. My thoughts on that, you know, you've talked about the route not being right. Well, you know, why just continue with something that's not right? The councillors there are telling us it's not right, the route. So why don't we look to change the route? Why don't the officers do a project to see that we can get a better route that actually encourages public to use it.
Okay, I didn't think Councillor Regan said that the 3B route was wrong. He says the route's right now. Yeah, that's what I thought. That's okay. Yeah. Fine. And yeah, I'm sure officers in the portfolio will be interested in discussing it with ward members. So, you know, in the interest of keeping moving, if everybody's content with that, we'll go for that option there. That's a clear one. 654, views on the bus thing. We are now, where are we? We've got three options, bottom of page 68. Extend the pilot scheme. This is an academic year thing because it's a school bus. So extend the pilot scheme to cover the next academic year, funded through BEST Section 106 contributions, which, if I understand correctly, is money that developers have already paid into a pot that's administered by Hampshire. So it's getting a little bit of money back from Hampshire. Or commission it as a subsidised service, or withdraw the service. Okay, comments, please. Councillor Jones.
Well, my view is by having school buses, kids use buses. A few years ago, a lot of the kids were used to being ferried around, and that becomes a natural way of travelling. I think if more children you get on buses, the better it'll be, and it gives them that independence as well. So I think we should continue with that. Personally.
Can I just ask, so the only slight concern I picked up from here was whether other schools would think they ought to have some as well, but on the other hand, this one's been around for years and nobody else seems to have got one, so that's a theoretical worry, is it, rather than a genuine worry?
I think, yes, we have to be careful on this because it may set a precedent, but at the same time, with talks with the governors and with the school, they can only put in £4,000 a year. That's all they've got. And basically from the paper, if we could make it into a commission service by extending the route at some stage we'll need to Queen Mary College, then it may become viable that we could commission this. But in the meantime, I think we'd said that we'd leave it, didn't we?
Councillor Hussey.
Sounds a good idea, but going down Cliddesden Road to QMC in the morning, you're going to add not 5 minutes onto the bus service, but a huge chunk. The traffic is silly in the morning. Anything to reduce the amount of traffic will be welcome. But a bus going all the way down Hackwood Road and up Grove Road to get into QMC is not a good option.
Thank you. I think it's very important. I won't put that in our comments, but I hope someone will have noted that because that's valuable local knowledge. Councillor Gard.
I certainly think we ought to extend the pilot scheme to cover the current school year, because if there are children using that bus now, they're going to want to continue using it. And as for QMC, about 4 o'clock most afternoons, you'll see all the QMC students walking down into the town to the bus station. So I don't actually think if they were dropped off at Costello, it would be that much further for them to walk. So they wouldn't actually have to take the bus down to QMC, just get them that close to it.
And that would achieve other good health benefits and things, yes. Okay, so yeah, just... the brain was just thinking of something else that was important to say. Yes, this is about extending it for the next academic year, not the current academic year. That's 15-16, isn't it? That which, just to make it clear, that's what...
It wasn't, but I will agree with it.
Councillor Tate.
Sorry, just to make something clear, the trial period is very much on the basis of trying to extend the route to make it a commissioned service. Otherwise, it will become a subsidy for one particular school, and then you're into a real precedent issue of Basingstoke funding school transport. So the purpose of the trial is to test out whether it can become a profitable service, which Stagecoach, they're the people who are saying, yeah, we could try and extend it to QMC and look at it that way. But to do that then it becomes a commissioned service in its own right. And I think it's quite important that we understand that's the purpose of the trial only, because otherwise we will be into a system of precedence which frankly, given the amount of money we're spending in transport already, is not going to be sustainable.
So can I just be quite clear? So when it says extend the pilot scheme, it's both extend it in time and in scope. Okay, fine. I hadn't picked that up. Councillor Smith.
Mine was only to come back briefly on the suggestion that people from QMC would be delighted to jump out at Costello, which I'm not sure would have quite the uptake Councillor Gardner hopes for.
But it would be good for them. Right, so I've not heard any votes in favour of withdrawal. Are we going for the extending the pilot scheme to try and extend the scope, recognising that it may not work because of the traffic problems, but I guess if you don't try, you don't find out. And I guess it's possible that one bus will take some cars off the route, which would help the traffic problems. Is that where we're going? That one? We're okay with that one? Yeah. Okay. Right. I don't think there's anything that can be said in favour of spending £80 a day on the Winkelbury shuttle, is there, even from Councillor Smith? No. So, and because I got into this a bit earlier, can I suggest we're okay with a brief pilot of the alternative of the taxi share while you find out whether these are people who could use the other even more appropriate services like dial-a-ride.
Sorry, I should have said earlier as well, there is an alternative option for Winkelbury residents, but it does involve changing. They have to catch the Route 6, and then they change at Houndsmill for Route 2. So there is an alternative, it's just not a direct link.
I'm not sure it's actually better than going into town centre and out again, but Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I'm not sure how wonderful an alternative that is, I must admit. But just to say that I accept that £80 a head is probably a bit much for the council to subsidise, but just want to work with the officers and the portfolio holder on finding an appropriate solution to those that do use the bus service.
Okay, that's our 4 bits we were specifically asked to address. Anyone dying to say anything else on this subject before we move on? Okay, thank you, Rich. Thank you much, officers. About to get on to youth services. Okay, so we're moving on to new services. Councillor Austin is still with us. She's a very busy portfolio holder this evening, and we've been joined by officers June and Mike. And I think, Cathy, it's over to you.
Okay,
again.
thank you very much. This report is a culmination of a comprehensive piece of work based on facts determined by the local community, including our young people. As a result, the report is long, but clearly it is set out in sections. And that is what is out there for the young people now, what do we anticipate that will be provided, and what is the expected gaps. We also looked at the potential impact of county funding cuts on services, identification of gaps and potential issues, and options to address these issues and offer further support to local communities in line with the Agreed Borough Youth Strategy. Now, Hampshire County Council funding for 2016-17 onward is likely to be reduced considerably, but their preferred option for the future shape of support is not yet known. So we are looking for further consultation on this in November, but they are working with us, if I'm correct. They are beginning to work with us. This is Council's approach to capacity building in local communities, means that the impact of Hampshire County Council's funding reductions will be relatively small in a borough-wide context, and that will be, you'll pick that up probably later. Irrespective of the actual amount of funding to be made available by Hampshire County Council, the emerging priorities for more effective services are considered to be training and support to increase the scope and ensure quality of delivery, flexible resources to enhance sustainability and development of support services, accessibility to ensure free and consistent services are available to all young people, and also we're looking for a quality mark scheme which has been discussed in the paper and managed through the National Youth Agency, because it looks very much from Hampshire County Council point of view that we actually haven't got anything, if I'm correct, to come back and work on this as well. So your comments would be... I haven't got this last slide, but I did ask for it. I just wanted you to see that the one-off revenue costs of 74,000 would need to either be met from savings in existing budgets and additional income, and this is bearing on the hub. The capital cost, if we had the hub, was 500,000 to $1 million, could be funded from a combination of uncommitted capital resources and the local infrastructure, which is the 106 contributions, or external partnership following. And it would say, following the Youth Hub feasibility study, the capital scheme is not agreed. There would be a requirement for one-off costs of 24,000, and that's adding the 6 and, was it 8? In the paper, adding up to 24. In addition, there would be the requirement for 60,000 ongoing revenue expenditure for a team of youth workers, and this could be part funded from Hampshire County Council's contributions and or ongoing additional savings. It demonstrates what is believed to be the case, namely financial sustainability. The project will be self-funding within 3 years, and thus being no requirements for continued revenue funding. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Before we get even into questions, can I just make sure we've all focused on page 12 of 111, which is what we're being asked to do. So we're asked to note the range of youth support services currently being delivered in the borough and the assessment of provision beyond next March. Our views are sought on 3 proposed priorities for more effective services. Our views are sought on the undertaking of a feasibility study into the provision of a financially sustainable central youth hub. And then I think the idea is that our views on the proposed priorities for more effective services will be forwarded to the County Council to influence their future approach to the support for youth services in Basingstoke and Deane. In particular, Hampshire County Council is requested to consider allocating their available funding to the Borough Council, a bit like we suggested with buses, to add value to the community-led youth delivery. So if I've understood it correctly, whilst that last slide said that if we might have to find the money, but equally if we can persuade Hampshire to devote their money through us, it'll be the money that they're currently spending, what's left of the money they're currently spending, that will be used to meet the revenue part of the priorities, not the capital on the hub. So I think I've understood that correctly.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm getting nods. Good. Right. And just to note for the webcasting, it matters that Councillor Bound has left us in accordance with his declaration of a pecuniary interest in this. So. And the other thing we ought to note is that this originated with a council motion back in December 2014, proposed by Councillor Cousins, who's not been able to stay, and seconded by Councillor Taylor, who's still with us. So thank you for starting all this off. We will do questions across the whole of the topic, and then we'll look at the proposals one by one. Councillor Gardner.
It was one of the comments in the report that said that the large reduction in funding would only see a small impact on local youth services, and I find that very hard to believe that withdrawing that money is actually going to have very little impact. Could somebody just explain why that money is not being effectively used now?
Can I add my question to that, because I think it's the same thing, but mine was a bit more specific, but I think it's the same, which is on page 16 of 111. as I understand it, the vast majority of that money is going into providing this borough-wide detached support service through BVA, but we're not told anything about what the detached youth work is delivering. We're just told that there's evidence dissatisfaction with it. So my question was, what is it doing at the moment, and why are people unhappy with it? That was the same question.
Well, it's not all detached work. A lot of the money goes into what they call youth hubs. So the money from the county is for youth hubs and detached work. The reason, you know, it was a bit unbelievable for ourselves when we started looking at that and sort of looking and realising that actually it was going to have little impact, as we believe, if that money is withdrawn. And I think as well, we've stated in the report that what's been happening over the last 4 or 5 years is there's been a lot of work to capacity build within the communities. So we've got lots more community organisations now running youth clubs and youth services. And so when the funding was initially made available for commission services, and BVA obviously got that resource, there was a need. But over this time, that resource is no longer needed now, because the communities are more up to speed, they're more sustainable, because they're funding their youth workers from their own resources, and they're providing those services, the advice and guidance, which is what the BVA team, youth team, are currently doing. And so therefore there's less requirement for them to do that work. So it's not saying that we don't need resources in the borough. I think this paper is saying we need resources, but we need them in a different area.
Can we just come back? So what do the detached youth services do?
Sorry, detached youth work is when they go out into the community and actually meet young people in the streets or in the park and talk to them and give them advice and guidance on that. But it is a small element of that amount of work. The major element of the funding is around the health hubs in each of the locations.
Okay, yeah, Councillor Gardner, you have another.
Well, it's not another go, it's just... Are we saying at the moment there is duplication of the services or an overlapping of the resource?
Yes, that is the case now. That's what's happened over time, and there now is that duplication and overlap, if you like, in the communities, and now taking on more of that responsibility.
If there is a duplication at the moment, is there a danger that we have got an oversupply of trained youth workers who are suddenly going to become redundant?
I don't think we've got an oversupply, because we're always looking for new youth workers, and the area is still expanding. There is still more work to be done, but what we're saying is, and what the 3 areas that we've looked at with the priorities is one of them, is about actually having quality and consistency. So that's about the training and support, is making sure that we've got the right support mechanisms in there and the right training to make sure we've got the quality youth workers.
Okay, just because I found the figure that the total BVA, health hubs and detached work, is 214,000 and a bit. But I thought I'd read somewhere that the detached work was 170,000 or something. Is that completely wrong? I can't find the figure now, which is why I thought it was most of it. Okay. You have a little look for that, and we'll let Councillor Smith have his question.
A very simple one from me. In terms of the different services are being offered across the town at the borough, you say that they're able to run themselves now. Is that because they're doing so well, in the nicest possible way? Is that why those services are able to run themselves, because they're working?
Yeah, I think the other thing to add is that with communities being able to deliver for themselves, they'll be able to be quite flexible in the way that they actually do their delivery, whereas the commissioned service from county has quite structured boundaries, and therefore it's true to say when we spoke to BVA, they have to work strictly within those parameters, so it is quite difficult to change very quickly to meet the needs of those young people. That's why certainly from our borough youth strategy it's all about trying to build capacity within the community, and we think that works best, and it is proven, I think, with some of the research that we've done, that they can be flexible in their approach to make sure that they're helping the needs of those young people in the area.
I'm delighted with the response, but it does bring me on to a question, I suppose, about this idea, and I don't want to get drawn too much of a different direction. But if that's working, and that's working so well, I mean, to my mind, if something's working, you pump it, and you give it more money, and you spend your focus there, rather than potentially trying to set up an alternative that would compete against that, in my mind. So if things are working locally, and you're creating within these smaller areas systems that work, that are flexible and can compete and can work well with that, why do you want to spend $500,000 to $1 million to set up something that's going to draw people away from that and draw away from those services?
We'll have an answer to that question. It's getting very close to a debating point. I'm sure we'll come back to that in debate, so let's have it answered as a
just answer that. But if you look in your paper, it does say that we have got to now, because of the funding throughout the country, that we need to look at the national youth forum, or whatever, it is the National Youth Forum, that they have to, they're saying we have to look at new models now and go forward with new models. And I think this is what's coming in to the communities.
Can I?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I think to answer your question, you're saying that we've got the communities doing it, so why do we need a hub, basically? And the answer to that is that the communities are dealing with localised things and general terms. If we go back, and in the paper it does refer to it, around Connections that was here a few years ago, and we had the town centre place where young people went. Having a central youth hub would be a place where all youth services could be supported and developed from, and the youth hub would have the potential to actually generate income, to pay for youth workers, to pay for the training and support, to bring in the advice, the careers advice that we're being asked for through our businesses and things, and the young people. They're saying they're not getting the quality of information. So the hub really is the umbrella bit, if you like, that will then support all of those communities to deliver locally, but also have a fundamental infrastructure.
I think we're going to need to come back to that in debate, and I've got 2 or 3 people with questions, but I found my numbers now, please, Mike. So page 30 of 111, existing provision 214 to 15. The hub provision is for relatively small amounts, and the detached service is 185,000 and 11,000, from which I deduced that almost all the money was going on the detached provision, and that the proposed reduction wouldn't stop the hubs, but would basically kill off the detached provision. So have I misunderstood that?
No, you're absolutely right in terms of the figures. In terms of the outcomes that's been seen through the detached, they're not clearly visible as to what they're actually doing now. I think the majority of the funding that they're receiving is being put into the hub provisions.
Sorry, I'm going to come to others in a minute. I just want to finish, but let's bottom this one. The majority of the funding that we're receiving, although it's down as detached services, is actually going into the hubs.
Correct.
Okay. Councillor Golding.
Sorry. Councillor Smith stole my question, so I shall ask another one. Please, going back to page 16, could you clarify the outcomes that you're looking for in point 5.6?
Is that the outcomes from a new hub, or the outcomes from...
Well, it says that the locally focused providers more adequately meet the needs of young people and achieve better outcomes than those delivered by BVA, but we haven't got much detail on kind of what those outcomes are. So what you're actually measuring that on.
5.6 refers to better outcomes. What are those better outcomes? Which outcomes are better I think I've understood the question. For those watching the webcast, the officers are conferring as to what that refers to.
Yes, correct, because I looked at the appendix, but that just gave me figures. It didn't give me any more detail than that.
I'll just say I'm sorry because I haven't got the answer to that, but it's basically you would want to know why when they were interviewing and questioning these people that it seemed to come back that there was it was easier done in small units than in the larger ones. You got it? Good.
Sorry, yes. What the groups were telling us and the feedback we were getting was that the young people are relating much better to local youth workers that are permanently working in their environments. They build up relationships, therefore are able to go and ask for advice and support. And our evidence has also shown us is where we have youth workers from VVA, there have been times where the numbers have dropped off within the young people attending those youth club provisions when they're not got that contact or that relationship with them. So, and that was a constant theme coming through from all the feedback we got from the local youth provision was that they got higher attendances where they have their local youth workers that are working on a regular basis and they build the relationships. So I think that's where they're able to go and ask for the advice and support they want. I think that's what we were trying to say.
Did you want to come back? No, and then we're on Councillor Hussey, and then we're on.
There's lots of qualitative statements throughout this paper, which I'm being asked to take on trust. It's almost like rabbits coming out of a hat. It's not going to be as costly as it was before. But there's no numbers there that add up. I can't see any little simple equation which says A plus B plus C minus D, that's the saving. It's not there. And the statements themselves are, I'll just read one. Feedback also evidenced dissatisfaction with the detached youth work delivered as a commissioned service and with some of the sessions run in local settings. I know this is a summary, and I then have to start looking through the paper appendices and looking at comments. I'm all over the paper to try and get at it, and I just don't get a good feel for the paper. I think all the work might be in there. I'm not saying the work has been done, but it's not presented in a way that's easy to digest. So I can't accept what we're being asked to note and recommend, because I just can't get my teeth into it. And it's obvious from some of the questions coming round from Councillor Gardner and Councillor, sorry, I don't know your Christian name, Councillor Golding, that we're all having the same level of difficulty. There's a vagueness about this paper in the way it's presented. I expect it's only in the way it's been presented, but all the detailed work is there. It's not been dragged out properly in a coherent way.
As a question, is there anything you can say to clarify? No, it's...
We acknowledge that it's a complex paper and it was a complex thing to sort of bring together, and how we presented it. We've tried to present it in the best way that we think possible, hence why it's got lots of appendices rather than making an even longer report than it is. Other than that, I don't know really how to respond.
And your light's not on, so you...
A simple cross-reference When you make a qualitative, assertive statement, which is a summary of detailed work, and there's a massive appendix, why is it cross-referenced? Appendix A, para 31 or whatever, or table 31.
Yeah. I mean, it is, because that is the point that I was asking about, which was exactly what is this detached youth work and why are people not detached? You know, what is wrong with, why are we, essentially it comes down to, there's a lot of money going into it. If Hampshire take their money away, we're not going to miss it because it's not achieving very much. But I just felt I wanted a bit more bones to that. But we'll perhaps come back to that. We'll do the rest of the questions. Candace Gardner, you were the next.
On page 27 of 111, there is reference to the Central Youth Support Hub with a capital cost of £500,000 to £1 million. What exactly is that going to be spent on? Because if we're reducing the number of hubs we've got at the moment to build a new super hub, why have we got to spend all this money?
I think there's a confusion of the word hub. At the moment, the health hubs are literally somewhere that they go for information. What we're talking about is a central building, and the capital money we're talking about is actually the purchase of a building to enable that work to happen.
Why are we looking to buy a building when there are vacant properties, some of which we own, in the borough?
Well, we have looked at that, but there aren't any at the size and the provision that you would need currently that we've looked at. But that's one of the reasons we are suggesting that there is a feasibility study done, because that would be part of what we would be bringing in, is looking at all the council-owned buildings that might be vacant, or what other possibilities there are out there. So that would be part of what the feasibility would look at. We're just giving you some indicative costs, just so that members have got an idea of what it is we would be looking for.
I'm absolutely sure about that. That is for the purchase of a building, not just to convert an existing vacant building for use as a hub. Well, because they're very different things. And
I think that's why we're saying there's such a vast difference between £500,000 and £1 million, because we don't actually know yet, and that's why I'm saying this is all indicative. It might be to purchase a building, but it might be, if we own it, to refurbish it or whatever. So.
okay, just to say the point, I'm coming back to the point of my point is, if you do take over an empty building that we get and don't pay a rent for it, that is an ongoing cost that somehow has to appear in the council's accounts as revenue for rent forgone. So, you know, whereas if you buy it outright, you don't have that issue. So I think it was Councillor Jones next. Yeah, no, that's the top two lines are HCCYSS, which I think was Youth Support Services, and the next half a dozen are HCCCSI, and I can't remember what that is, but that's...
The top two lines are the YSS money, which you quite rightly said, Chair. CSI grants are county council grants as well. At the moment, we have no indication that that grant fund will be cut. And what this paper shows is, or the appendix, shows what's currently being funded in 15-16. CSI grants are on an annual basis, so we wouldn't know beyond that. And then there are other grants, particularly Basingstoke and Dean borough grants, where the grants have been given through the commissioning over a 3-year period, so that there is money going into some of the youth organisations that are providing advice, guidance, etc., up to 17-18. So we're just trying to give a flavour of where the funding is.
I was really looking at the Hampshire Council, because if they're going to cut 81% of the budget, that would be those projects that will go. And I still can't get my head round that it won't make much of a difference, because they're looking through these they seem quite feasible projects. I don't know.
I think the answer we've been given is that the funding we're expecting is just focused on the health hubs and the detached provision. There's still a question as to why we wouldn't miss it, but that's all that we're being told wouldn't be missed. It was Councillor Day after that, I think.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, similar, I guess, comments as others. But one of the things that I have enjoyed hearing is about the community work and about how that's working well, and how the officers and the youth are enjoying the experience of that. So what didn't get, and when I read the paper, I was a bit confused as why we needed the hub, and I'm still not having what's been said now, understanding that, because my thoughts are this: what we'll do, we'll destroy the communities by everything will want to be centralised in the hub, and that'll take good people from the communities and put them to the hubs, or we'll lose them totally to the service because they'll be fed up that Big Brother, because that's what a hub becomes, the Big Brother organisation that needs to organise everything that goes on and the procedures and everything else. So I'm not in favour of the hub. I'm not in favour of paying £500,000 to £1 million to build something either, because we have the orchard over there, and I've been over to the orchard, and I actually do think BVA do a very good job under what they're commissioned to do with the youth. So we have a building that sits across the, from here. So I'm a bit baffled by it all as well.
I mean, I think we will have a proper debate about the hub, and I mean, I think part of the answer to that is it's not in the town centre exactly, but that may or may not matter. That's the bit I've understood of it. Any more questions? Yes, Councillor Loney.
Could I just ask, I was reading about training and support for the youth workers, and obviously that's one of the main issues, is that we've got well-trained. Do we ever work with BCOT on the training they put on for staff? My granddaughter works there, and she's come back and they've done 2 bits of training, and she talked it through with me. They've been fantastic. One was on radicalisation, and the second one was on legal highs and drug recognition. And I just think if we could, I'm sure BCOT, because they are a partner in some ways with the borough, they would be more than happy for our youth workers when they're putting particular training on that might be of use to the youth workers, for them to attend. I'm pretty sure they would, and I just think it's something else to think about, because then we're not paying out for the trainers, because it's being put on anyway for staff at BCOT.
All of our training that we put on is through Basingstoke District Training Consortium, of which BCOT are members. I wasn't aware through that forum that they're actually putting on that training, because actually we've put some on specifically for youth workers on the legal highs, and radicalisation is actually on the next agenda for the Youth Worker Forum to see if we can get a speaker to come and talk about that. So I can certainly follow that up with BCOT as to whether or not we can share some of those costs. The only thing I would add to that is that the training courses that we put on for community and voluntary groups through, commonly known as the Purple Book, but the training programme, is heavily subsidised to make it accessible for those youth workers in particular that can attend.
Okay, thank you. That was a comment of it was really interesting at BCOT, so we'll find out. Now, debate. Can I say, I think that, the first question we've come up with is not one of the ones we've been asked to address, but it is one of the ones that was raised. It is the question that was raised by the original motion, which was that Hampshire is proposing to cut the hubs and the detached youth service provision by potentially 81%. Now, it's been put off for a year, but I don't think we can take it any further tonight, RHS Committee, but I think there's a general feeling that we haven't got all the information we want, and if you're content, we will ask officers just to do us a note that tells us a bit more what that money is currently spent on, why the people who were dissatisfied with it were dissatisfied, and how you've come to your conclusion that we wouldn't really miss it if it wasn't there. Because we're not being asked to prioritise money, that whether you think £500,000 or £1 million is worth spending on a hub, that would be capital expenditure that we couldn't spend on supporting a revenue item like this anyway. So we're not being faced with a choice here. We're just being asked to accept that we wouldn't miss the Hampshire money, and I think we don't disbelieve it, but we're certainly not persuaded. So is that feasible, that you could do I mean, if you could circulate it sometime, we'll ask roughly when in before, but before the summer, then we can as committees by email say whether we think we want a further discussion on that or whether we're just now satisfied. Is that okay as a way of taking that bit forward? Councillor Huston.
Limited to the brief you've just given, we don't want a representation of the whole paper. It's just that narrow definition that you've just come up with.
Just the Hampshire money on the hubs and the detached youth provision, what it's currently being, not just the numbers, what it's theoretically being used, but what it's actually being used for, what work is being done, why some people have said they're dissatisfied with it, and why you as officers have reached the conclusion that it wouldn't be that much missed. Because if we agree with that conclusion, then we can stop worrying. But if we're not persuaded, we may want to come back because we will still have time in the autumn before Hampshire make their next decisions to say, actually, potentially we're not persuaded, we want you to go back and argue this with Hampshire. So when would you like to suggest when you might be able to do that for us by? Could we, end of July, some people will have disappeared on, so those who still have young families will have disappeared on their holidays by the end of July. Mid-July? Mid-July, if that's okay. That's basically a month, isn't it? Okay, is that all right for our first conclusion? You're writing it all down? Excellent. Right, now we're asked to talk about 3 possible relatively low-cost initiatives that this borough could take that would be potentially very helpful, irrespective of whether the Hampshire money goes, and that's training and support, flexible resources, accessibility. Anyone got any comments on any of those 3 proposals? Councillor Golding, thank you.
Yes, I'm quite concerned that this is just down as an initial cost and there doesn't appear to be anything built in for recruitment and retention. Because if you're only investing in 2 youth workers who are then trained to train people, they're only trained to a level where they can train people to do youth work. They're not trained to a level where they can train other people to be trainers. So if they then leave, you've got no kind of contingency and you lose those skills and there's no money, doesn't appear to be any money built in.
Are you following the point? Just training them up is fine if they stay. Just training them up doesn't deliver you anything long term if once you've trained them they go.
With all due respect, can I say you take that with anybody that goes into a job, don't you? There will be other trainers in other departments that can step in.
Go on.
Yes, in doing this, we may not have been explicit there, but in training people to cascade it, we've become their trainers to train the trainer. So that's the idea, is that you pay out to do the qualifications, and then you can then train trainers and train, and then they can go out and train. So it's all about cascading training out into the community.
And I guess you could always find another 6k if you needed to do it again. I mean, it's not a huge sum, but anyone, any reservations about the holder and officers proceeding with these 3? I must say they're nice small amounts that look as though they could achieve quite a lot. I'm always attracted by things like that. Yes, Councillor.
Can you just tell us which page you're on at the moment in terms of which we're looking at?
The costs are on page 26 of 111. The options are on pages 22 onwards. So you've got training and support where it's in each case it's the shaded option that is the preferred one. We're given 3, but the shaded one is to train youth workers as trainers to cascade training across the borough. The second one is to commission or procure an independently managed accreditation scheme. And the third one is to expand on the Do Your Bit initiative. And then there seems to be a fourth one, to be honest. Some of these have got, no, I think there's sub-bits within. So there's 2 bits within flexible resources and 2 bits within accessibility. So there's actually a total of 5 shaded proposals.
Now I'm with you. If I could just comment, training the youth workers, yes, we do need trained youth workers. That probably goes without saying. An independently managed accreditation scheme. Do we actually need our own scheme, or are there schemes that we can buy into, which will have national accreditation rather than just local accreditation? Because I think it's being accredited to Basingstoke and Dean may be of a very high standard, but will it be recognised? The Do Your Bit initiative, well, no cost, is really not an argument. A small team of youth workers provides flexible support. Now this I think was more of an ongoing thing once we've looked at where we are in the future, in terms of actually having a flying squad that can actually fill gaps in local provision. And I think when we get to that point, I think that's an excellent idea. But it does say the risk is that people will become dependent on people coming in to help and won't provide their own. So we've got to make sure that we are training up the local people as well. And then we get on to the hub, which we'll come to in a minute.
On that third point, I mean, I suppose I should have asked it as a question, but firstly, this small team of youth workers provide flexible support and special need. I wasn't quite sure how different that was from detached youth work, but we'll find out when we've got you further description attached to it. But I thought perhaps there was a fourth option, which was to encourage all these successful local things to provide a mutual support network, so that is there any possibility of a mechanism that, if they're suddenly short of somebody in Tadley because of illness, that Winklebury will help out because they've built it that sort of way, rather than us having people who we send out, which again, because yes, once it's all central, as it says here, people do tend to get to rely on the central. Is there an option that's not here of actually us working to encourage mutual support mechanisms across the borough so that people help each other out?
That does already happen in part now. We have a successful youth worker forum, and that's exactly the type of thing that happens. If somebody is short one night due to sickness or anything, they put an email around, and if someone can cover, they can. The joy of the peripatetic youth workers, as we've put in there, is that one of the things the communities were coming back and saying to us, or there's 2 points. One is turnover of part-time youth worker staff tends to be relatively high. So if somebody does leave, there could be 3 months gap before somebody comes in. So that's a bit more of a commitment than a one-off night to help somebody out. So that's one. And the other point was the smaller, some of the 25 odd youth projects that we've got around the borough, they are small. I use North Waltham as an example. They're relatively small. They don't do any information, advice and guidance per se. It's where young people can just come along and have a good time on a Friday night with activities. The youth workers would be able to potentially go into that setting and provide some of the health information that they might be lacking at that particular project.
Anyone wish to suggest that we don't support one of these low-cost items? You feel free. It's a debate.
I don't know that I want to suggest we don't support it, but I honestly don't feel like I've been given a compelling reason to support it, if you'll forgive me. Going back to your point, Chairman, about, and going back to my earlier point about developing these communities to support themselves and to support each other, to me, I don't know that employing a full-time person to do that for them if they need it, while I would wish them to have resource and support, I don't know that this feels like the best way to do that, to my mind. I might well be wrong, but I don't feel like I've been given a reason that I should want it at the moment.
Just on that point, that idea actually came from some of the youth projects themselves. When we went around and talked to them, that's the type of added support. They're grateful for the support they get, but with that extra resource they would be able to fill those stopgaps when they have somebody leave. They would be able to be upskilled themselves. And they're not talking about someone doing it for them forever. They're talking about that a little bit more added support not only to upskill their youth workers to continue to deliver, but also to bridge the gap where there is, for some reason, a gap in their delivery.
And that would be people employed by us?
That's certainly one option, yeah. Initially, it's something that could, I don't want to stray into perhaps the next point, but that is something that could potentially, if the hub model works in the future, transfer to them.
Am I getting the feel that we I mean, our comment to the portfolio holders, we sort of like these ideas, but we're happy for you to consider it further with officers before you decide finally whether you want to go ahead with any of these, because we don't regard any of these as so obviously must-dos that we would be upset if you didn't do them. Is that a fair way? So is that okay? Yeah.
Can I just come back? Because if you're saying this was a motion that came forward from council, that we had to do this piece of work. Now, it was to do with the youth and the lack of the hub. Yeah, we want to be very careful that this money will be going in November, and we don't want to be left with no youth services. So I think what the paper is basically saying as well, if I'm incorrect, and I've read it twice, and I must say that on my second reading I understand it perfectly, and I see what you're saying to me, that we don't do anything now for the youth. Do we leave it now and wait and see what happens with it?
Well, I guess the problem is that as we don't understand what we're going to lose by Hampshire taking their money away, we don't know what we as the borough need to do to replace it. That's the problem. So, and we can't afford to wait that. So, but I take your point, which I hadn't missed, that actually this mightn't be our money. This might be our shopping list for what's left of Hampshire's money. Is that correct?
I think for clarity, what we've done and tried to look at this, I think there are two issues. There is the issue of the Hampshire funding and what impact that will have. And we believe, and I take on board what members have said, but from the research we've done, that that will have very little impact. But what the report is also saying, that in order to ensure we've got youth services going forward, it's other areas where funding needs to go into to ensure we have that funding. And we're offering up the Youth Hub, if you like, as a long-term solution to supporting youth services for our young people in the borough.
Yeah, we're coming to the Youth Hub in a minute. So perhaps to put a slightly more positive spin on it, I guess the training youth workers we'd support. Accreditation we'd probably support. Expanding on the do your bit initiative is quite, but that's about encouraging volunteering, isn't it? So I guess we'd also support that. So we really just have of the smaller spends, our reservation is around whether we want to employ people or whether we'd like to see more effort going into encouraging mutual support. But we're not giving you a clear you must do this and you mustn't do that. We're saying these are our views, but please take them into account in reaching your own decision, which leaves the hub. Yeah, go on.
I'd just like to reassure Kathy that we're not saying do nothing. We do need youth provision. We do need something in place. And what this motion said was, what are we going to do about the cuts? And that, I think, is coming out of this paper. There are some good ideas in there. If you go ahead with what's in here as a cabinet recommendation, I would support it.
Just to be clear, we are supporting 3 out of the 4 small initiatives, and we've only got a question mark over the 4th, so we are saying, yes, please do something. Now, the hub, I mean, again, I'm sure lots of people got things to say about it. I just struggled with, and I think you picked up with saying that hubs being used in a different way. I struggle with this concept that all these locally based things are so successful because people know they're youth workers and this sort of things, with the idea that the big thing we should do is something centralised. That just, so again, talk us through that again, because I think a lot of us are struggling with that.
Sorry. The basis of a youth hub is looking at, there's 2 elements really. It's looking at the services that young people need outside. You know, we've looked at the hub and information and guidance that you can train youth workers up to have generalist knowledge and support. What we know from the research and through what happened with connections, etc., that we've got, and we've got counselling, YPI, etc., that those services all need supporting going forward. And what we're being told by young people and by our service providers, that they would like a central place in the town where young people can go for other, more specialist advice and guidance around careers, maybe more health generated issues and things, where they're not going and having a stigma because they're going into somewhere and people know why they're going into there. So they're going into a facility that is purposely there for young people. Also, still on the agenda is a youth cafe. The young people are still saying they want somewhere to go to be able to sit with their friends and do things. So in looking at a youth hub, what we were looking at and what we would like to do the feasibility on is to look at, and there are other models in the country where this is working, where you bring a lot of specialist things together, where you can generate income that will then provide the services that we need to provide to young people that are continually at the moment requiring grant funding. Does that sort of make more sense?
Can I just be quite clear? If it's possible, are you envisaging that this would be a source of information for young people who are already involved in the more local things but don't want the embarrassment of asking this question locally but will go into a central one? Or are you expecting it'll pick up youngsters who are not currently getting the advice and support anywhere?
It would be both, and having that central location. And as I say, this isn't something where we've said as officers that we need a central hub. This is through, we've been out and we've spoken to all the providers in the communities, and they're saying that they also want that central hub because they see that as a support mechanism for them as well. So it's sort of, if you like, in a way, you could like it to a community association, a community centre, where you've got all the services and things there supporting what's going on, and that really, that bringing all of that together, and that's what the hub would do, is a central location where you've got those central services where young people could go to get that advice and support, in addition to what they would have locally to do their activities and things.
We saw a couple of hands down this side, and I saw Councillor Hussey, and Stephen saw Councillor Loney. Is that correct? So if we go Councillor Loney first, if we.
I mean, I support the idea of a hub. My reason for saying that is that last year, when there was the first discussion about the money being cut, at Brighton Hill, ours was one of the last youth centres or youth activities, and we were being very much supported by South Ham, because South Ham had got a whole committee of volunteers who were supporting, and I'm just concerned that if Brighton Hill's youth facility went, if there was a hub, the young people would still have somewhere, and possibly, because we haven't got that committee working, that the hub could talk very much to the young people of Brighton Hill, or could put youth workers, if you've got youth capacity, back out. So I'm being quite selfish when I say I'm supporting it, because I see it being a good support if somewhere like Brighton Hill does go, which was very much on the agenda last year.
And sorry, light again. And you wouldn't worry that having it there as a backstop might make it more likely that local things would cave in, because they think, oh, we don't need to keep going because there's always the hub.
No, I think what happens, if as long as the youth leaders that they feel safe and work well with locally, then that's fine. My concern is if they go, then they're going to need something. And so no, I don't think one. I think what one does, I think what the hub will do, in a sense, is enhance what you're getting locally.
Councillor Hussey?
The hub, I think it's, in my mind, it's confused, and I think the proposition that we're currently thinking about is confused. We've got the specialist advice and guidance, but then we've also got an income generating stream for coffee. Well, we've already got Costa Coffee. Are we talking about something else? Like, I mean, what is the point of having a coffee shop in the town centre? Is that where the £500,000 is? £500,000 to £1 million is going. Advice and guidance, where they've got specialist knowledge and specialist facilities to access whatever, that I can understand, because they can provide advice and guidance not just to the youth, but to the youth workers out in the sticks. But the generating income bit, is that why we need £500,000 to £1 million building? And if it is, if we've got the cost in there, capital cost, why haven't we got an income stream quantified?
The youth cafe part would only be one element. What we're saying, in order to provide all of these youth services like the advice and guidance, there is no income generation from that. So it would be a constant drain on public purse or whatever to support that. What we're saying is, could we look at a model that would be a social enterprise that would generate the income to provide those services, which means that they wouldn't need to then come to the Basingstoke-and-Deane or Hampshire County Council or any other trust to provide that income. So we're just saying, going forward, we know that finance is going to be difficult in whatever arena. We would like the opportunity to do a feasibility study to show that something like that could have the possibility of being financially sustainable and support the youth services for the future. So at this point, we're not asking you to pay out this money. What we did was give you indicative cost to know what we're possibly looking at, but to ask you, could we go and do a feasibility study that will look at a social enterprise that will provide the services for our young people into the future?
Thank you. I was coming around to that. Gardner.
I was going to say exactly that. I'm not sold on this sort of money being spent on a hub without a feasibility study. So I would hold fire on actually spending £500,000 to £1 million until we've had the feasibility study.
I think that's right. Councillor Smith.
I think we're getting some clarity perhaps where it wasn't quite there before. I've seen a number of youth facilities fail, so I instinctively have some reservations. I don't think there's anyone in this room who's not desperate to see appropriate support for young people and things for them to do. My concern with these things is that in the past I've seen them turn into wonderfully expensive white elephants. And that's my starting point. I'm desperate if I can see a model that I can get behind to get behind one. But I come to it from that reservation. But I think the problem we've had today perhaps is that it hasn't been clear exactly what we've been asked to do.
I think we're getting there. Councillor Day.
Thank you, Chair. For me, again, I go back to the good work that they've done in the communities, and I think we should cherish that. And we, if it's, as I say, if it's not broken, don't fix it. It doesn't need it. It seems to be perfectly well. It does need some expertise and some other support workers. So we have option on page 15 of 20. Employ a small team of youth workers, provide flexible support and specialist advice where needs. That seems to fit that quite nicely. As regards the hub, I go back to the orchard over there, where BVA sit. There is a building and there's a facility there. I'm not buying why we need to build something else. That's why I'm sat today. I'm not saying I can't be convinced. I just make the point I don't feel comfortable with £500,000 on a building when I see there's one over there. And we have a good team. There's been some criticism of BVA tonight, but I also want to make it clear that they do a very good job, I believe. I know I'm not part of the youth group, but from what I see with the youngsters that are with them, they seem very happy and very contented, but maybe they need some more specialist training. So let's have the specialist worker then.
I think we get it. Can I suggest that where we've got to, we're not being asked to agree that £500,000 or £1 million would be worth spending. All we're being agreed to ask tonight, having looked at. So, do you? Yes.
Can I just ask a question? The feasibility study, will that be done in-house and we're not going out to consultation or anything silly like that, costing us lots of money?
Well, we're not costing. What I was going to say, and then you tell me if I've got it wrong, but if you compare page 12 and page 26, what we're being asked on page 12 is to agree to the undertaking of a feasibility study funded from savings in current revenue budgets. In other words, they don't have to find any money. There's some loose money hanging around in the council somewhere that can be used. And then on page 26, it's 15,000. So we're only being asked to agree to spending 15,000 to do more work on this, which I think probably we ought to say yes to, and I think we ought to ask that that work specifically addresses the issue as to why a £500,000 or £1 million building in the town centre would be better than using BVA. I mean, I think that's a point the study should consider. And I think we should ask for it to come back here. I mean, it's clearly not going to be done by mid-July like the other thing we want to report on. So once you've got an idea of how long it'll take, we'd like some feedback on when it would come back here so we can timetable it. But the point I can't specifically answer is Councillor Still's point. Is this going to be done in-house, or we going to spend the 15k on somebody outside?
No, it would be bring a consultant in to do that work.
Do you wish to come back on that?
Well, only in as much as will it be 15,000, or that's the cut-off point. Hopefully, no more.
Is that a reason?
We don't anticipate that it will be more than that. No.
Okay. Councillor Jones.
I think at the end of the day, we've got to move on. We know there's going to be cuts. We need something done, and I don't think we've got any alternative. I think the paper's gone through. In my mind, it's been a difficult paper to follow, but things have come out now, and I think we should actually go along with this paper and get a feasibility study done, and then let it come back, and then we can pick it to pieces if we don't like it, or we might say, great, go ahead.
Councillor Smith.
Sorry, Chairman, thank you for indulging me. Just one more. Whenever any report does come back to the committee, can it please examine the alternative of any possibilities of those services being provided to hubs rather than from a central hub, but to different local alternatives?
Yeah, is that okay? Without adding to the 15k too much? Okay, so summarising, we are going to get a paper in mid-July that fills in the details of what the Hampshire money is currently spent on and why people are dissatisfied with some aspects of the service, and why we, in officer's judgment, we won't miss it particularly, and then we can decide whether we want to debate that. We've endorsed clearly three of the small spends, and we're a bit ambivalent about the fourth, but we're not against it. We're just, you'll take our views away. And we endorsed spending of 15k on this feasibility study, and we would like a report back in a debate before any decisions are made. Now, we're all okay with that? You're okay with that? Thank you. So, as is my tradition, we will now have a 5-minute break to refill the coffees and expel previous coffees, and then we'll get on to the last main item. Thank you. Right, okay, ladies and gentlemen. We're now on the last paper of the evening. Findings from the Leisure and Recreation Needs Assessment. We still have Councillor Ossleton with us. She's working hard tonight. And we've been joined by Mike and Marion. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. This is the findings from the Leisure and Recreational Needs Assessment and Principles for Sport and Recreation Provision. This paper gives an independent assessment of sport and recreation provision undertaken initially in 2009, which provided an evidence base of the quantity, quality and accessibility of sports facilities. This piece of work is scheduled approximately every 5 years to comply with guidance in the National Planning Policy Framework, which states that planning policies must be based on robust and up-to-date assessments. And the initial work on this was done by consultants who were brought in to do this. The findings have shown that the priorities and opportunities are for retaining, improving and providing facilities. The findings have been used to inform some key principles to guide the future direction of planning for future sports and infrastructure. And we have 2 strategies coming forward in the autumn, and this is Built Sports Facilities Strategy and the Playing Pitch Strategy. The 2 are interlinked together, and they'll be found in Appendix 2. The principles are set out to complement the objectives of the strategic plan for sport and recreation and are also guided by our aspiration to maintain the borough's reputation for quality leisure provision. And there are 3 objectives, which were retaining and maintaining existing facilities which are highly valued by the community. 2 was improve the quality of capacity of facilities which are highly valued by the community. And 3, where there is evidence of need that cannot be met by existing provision, enable the development of new provisions. And these fit in, I won't read out, but it is on the back as to what the principles are, and they do dovetail into objectives 1, 2, 3. The 4th one is something we'll be having to do in the future, and it is looking up at the moment, and that's drive up participation in sport and physical activity to increase the number of frequency of people taking part in regular basis, ensuring that there are choices that offer low-cost options. And we hope this will be achieved, as I say, quite quickly. So, over to you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, so, committee, just to remind us, this is part of a series of bits of work we're doing on sport-related items. The work programme that we'll be discussing after this pencils in for this to come back to us in September with these draft strategies. So we're only commenting tonight on the principles on which the strategies are going to be built. We don't have to get every detail nailed down tonight. The leisure and recreation needs assessment has been done, so we're not being asked whether it's, right. We're just being asked to talk about the conclusions drawn from it. So with that background, questions, please. Mr. Councillor Smith.
It's not a question. Sorry, Chair. Forgive me. I forgot earlier. I am a member of Basingstoke Rugby Football Club, so I have a non-pecuniary interest.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Gardner.
Despite your preamble, it is actually a bit of detail. A couple of points. Page 55 and 56 of 111. Tennis courts, outdoor and indoor. You talk about the number of courts currently available in the borough. Does that include the court at Pamber Heath, which is operated by the parish council?
Yes, they do.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, they do. There is a definitive list that is put together. We've sent out a questionnaire that went to all the parish and town councils and sought their input into what facilities they had and give some measurements as to what sort of condition they were in as part of this overarching assessment. Yeah.
Are you aware it's in very poor condition? The parish council are actually seriously considering closing it because the cost of bringing it up to any suitable playable standard is outside of their outside of their ability to pay, and the income from it is only about £500–600 a year.
Without having the full list in front of me here right now, I do recognise that it's inevitable that there are questions asked about, you know, the quantity and the quality of facilities around the borough. And it's interesting, the point that was made earlier on about facilities that are highly valued by their communities. It's obviously an assessment's got to be made about if it's a facility that's not valued by the community, then a judgment needs to be made at some point as to whether it's to to continue with that, or whether a judgment is made to discontinue. And clearly, in this particular example, the question of value comes into play, and whether or not it's worthwhile continuing to invest in that.
The other point was on the next page. Petanque. You say there's only one petanque terrain in the borough. I'm certainly aware that a lot of petanque is played, but usually on small courts attached to public houses. And there is a demand, I would say. Sorry, there is a demand for petanque to be played. We're only looking at one terrain. Is that adequate for future demand?
To be honest, it's a difficult question to answer, because it's chicken and egg. You need more facilities in order to understand whether or not there's more demand. What we do know is that of the facilities that's currently provided, it's a well-used entity by the Petanque Club. I think it's next to the Basingstoke Rugby Club. So it suggests that there is demand, certainly for one. We need to explore whether there's the opportunity as part of our provision going forward, whether it's something we need to provide elsewhere as well, to meet any demand that we can find or research.
Okay, my question is around the things that aren't on the list of the outdoor facilities and whether they're covered to us. Fitness trails seem to be very popular and very good exercise. BMX we don't seem to have. Skate park got mentioned somewhere else. Now they're not team sports, but they're actually very good facilities for getting individuals active. Golf isn't a team sport, but that's on the list. And with respect to Councillor Jones, my understanding is that golf is decreasing in popularity, but cycling is increasing in popularity. And have we considered the possibility of having a off-road cycle track, something that goes round, not in a circle, but where people who want to improve their fitness and improve their times can actually cycle round a circuit that's suitable for fast bikes to go round, different from BMX, which is obviously a different thing. So that was fitness trails, skate park, BMX, and a cycle, not an indoor one, an outdoor one, suitable for want of a better description, racing bikes.
Just going down the list. Yes, for fitness trails, what we've been very aware of is, as part of this study, we've concentrated very much more on the formal sports. We recognise that there's opportunities for informal sports, such as the fitness trails and skate parks and so forth. We've sought to complement the green spaces study that's been done, and to pick up any gaps in between. So, whilst this not necessarily pick up the informal recreation per se, we've been anxious to ensure that it does, if you like, marry into or combine with other studies that have been carried out. I'm aware, for example, that there's a cycling one, a cycling plan being talked about. I think it was talked about earlier on this evening. And now some of that wouldn't be obviously about cycling on roads or cycle paths, but equally about development of cycling, opportunities for off-road cycling as well, whether it's for beginners or for advanced cyclists as well. So yes, there's potentially a real market around that. The one thing that is mentioned in here you talked about was golf. And yes, it's not one we've concentrated on particularly in this study, but we recognise that as a sport, we've got good provision in Basingstoke at the moment. But like everything else in trends and cycles we've seen with football, trends change, and we've just respond to that, make sure we're providing adequately.
Light. Thank you. Sorry, breaking my own rules and getting into comment, because it's just, I don't think we're as this is partly meant to influence how developer contributions are spent, I think it's important that somewhere we're picking up these lower cost, individual but very valuable facilities like the fitness trails and which I think probably in the past have tended to be built out of Section 106 money, so I think it's important we don't lose them. And the cycle track thing would be a lot more expensive, but could draw in people from quite a way around. So I'd encourage you, even if we don't want to support that as a committee, to at least think about whether that's something that we could promote somewhere. Any more questions? Councillor Stern.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is AstroTurf different to artificial grass? Because AstroTurf takes gallons and gallons of water, doesn't it, to keep it going, which is not good, in my view.
In principle, they are the same, one and the same. You get AstroTurf pitches which are sand-based, you get AstroTurf pitches which are water-based. You get the grass, which is the rubber crumb, which is more about synthetic grass with rubber in it. So, but in principle, they're all the same, but there are slight differences depending on the sport on which is to be played. For example, for hockey, it would just be sand-based, because the ball wouldn't be able to travel, and it's quite the same way they do for artificial grass, rubber crumb type surfaces, which is more for football purposes and so on. So, but in the main, yes, the broad principle is they're all artificial surfaces. The slight difference comes in the terminology, whether it's sand-based or whether it's grass-based surfaces, depending on the sport. So in answer to your question, it's artificial pitches, yes. Multi-sport surfaces are things like tennis, mugger, those kinds of things, tend to be hard surfaces. So you tend to find it's tarmac-driven with some sort of painting or surface cover like you would probably get at tennis courts and so on. But for sport specifically, you tend to find they're moving more towards grass-based as opposed to sand-based. That's a general drive you find amongst AstroTurf pitch applications.
Thank you. So when I went to Downgrange many years ago, well, it wasn't many years ago, I was once the portfolio holder for Sport and Leisure, and they showed me the AstroTurfs, but they also said the water, you have to water it constantly. Is that correct? I mean, and that's what I'm worried about with these new ones. Will they require lots? I've just gone onto the climate change panel, you see. So, so I'm just, asking the question because we need to consider these things with the water shortages coming. Sorry, I said with the water shortages coming, I have no idea if there are, but if there were ever to be any water shortages.
But we'll know who to blame if there are.
Back in 2011, there used to be a water-based surface, which is, if you like, probably the international or very much top-level hockey surface to play on. That did require tons of water to be constantly put in it before games and so on. They changed that in 2011 to a sand-based surface, which doesn't require nothing like the amount of water that was previously used. They tend to still water it from time to time in order to give it uniformity of surface, so that the sand is spread evenly and they can play as naturally as possible. But yeah, rest assured, we're not talking, for the new pitches, we're not talking water-based pitches at all.
Councillor Smith, did I see your hand again? Yeah.
Yeah, it was more following up on what you'd said earlier, Chairman. There's reference in here to swimming pools and outdoor swimming facilities in terms of outdoor pools. I don't know if it's the case in the borough at the moment, but I want to know whether the question's been asked about outdoor swimming facilities for triathlon clubs and the like, and whether there's any awareness of that in the borough.
That's an interesting question. We have had a growing need for triathlon-based training activities because they use the swimming pools, the cycling and the running. But we haven't had any specific requests for outdoor pools per se for triathlon-based purposes. So I can pick that up, certainly.
Just to clarify, it's not actually outdoor-based pools. It's normally training lakes and the like. And I know there's one near Eastleigh and there's one up in Reading, but I didn't know if there were any in between in the borough that were being looked at or had been spoken to you about.
No more questions. We'll get into any comments we want to make on the draft principles or strategy or whatever it is. Right. I had one comment which I'd already mentioned to you briefly when we had our discussion. The LRNA on what is page 1 of 7, I can't see, says that long term we need an additional 25-metre pool by 2029. On page 59 of 111, the council should aspire to have a 50-metre pool by 2025. Now, I'm sure former Councillor Chapman will be cheering that we've upgraded 25 metres to 50 metres, but I do wonder whether the extra length is justified. And then further down on that page, you say that land should be set aside in the next phase of development at Manydown for the provision of a new strategic sports hub, including pool. And I do wonder if 50 millimetres is the aspiration, whether it's a realistic aspiration ahead of Manydown, and therefore whether you should re-timetable that aspirations. If there's no plan for it on the first phase of Manydown, if you want it on the second phase, it needs to be on a slightly longer term as an aspiration. Any other observations? Councillor Still?
Yes, I'd just like to clarify something you've said. It's Keith Chapman, MBE. Use his correct title.
Fine, good. I stand corrected. Councillor Hussey.
I haven't read this paper, unfortunately, before this very minute. So my question, please treat me kindly if you say that I've missed it. Under 5.4, the objectives, which I fully support, particularly number 4, about driving up participation in sport, I'd have liked to have seen some reference to encouraging juniors to take up sport. I would like to see, I don't know if it's mentioned elsewhere in the report, but I'd like to see a little bit of emphasis there to get them involved in sport at an early age.
I like that, but can I just, because I appreciate you having the touch rate, this is summarising a strategic plan that already exists. Yeah. So we don't want to start undoing a strategic plan. You may be right, it's something missing from the plan, but this is a summary of an existing plan. Anybody? Councillor Jones.
Well, the commitment is to try to retain the water space, the capacity, the amount of water, which is reflected in 3.1 of the principles that you're going. Obviously, with Cranbourne, it's owned by Hampshire County Council, and they've got school there as well. And at the moment, they're in dialogue with each other about the future of that pool. We're aware of the discussions that are taking place at the moment, but because this is between the school and the county, we're not in a position to have any direct influence on that. But at the present moment in time, that may change as time evolves, and then we can probably have a better understanding of what support we can offer and what we can give. I think what you recognise, however, is that that pool does provide important water space when we're looking at the overall mix here.
Councillor Loney.
I notice under here that there are, I'm not going to mention any names because I don't know about any others, there may be others, but in the borough we have 2 hotels who have pools, and they certainly have off-peak very good membership, and if you're an oldie like me, it's even cheaper still. So in a sense, I think we just need to be aware that there are other provision, not that we have any control over, because obviously the hotel groups own them, but they are there, and they give, you know, in a sense, it's a very reasonable membership for off-peak hours.
Thank you. That's a good point. So you'll pick that up. I mean, you make sure that's, yeah, okay. Committee, I mean, we've still got to discuss our work programme, and we're generally supposed to finish by past. Unless anyone particularly wants to endorse any of the specifics I said, can I just leave as our conclusion that we support the principles, and we made some individual comments that you will have noted but that don't need to be in our minutes. That includes other people's comments as well as mine, and that we look forward to the papers coming back in September. Is that okay, guys? Yeah. Thank you very much. Sorry we had to keep you to last. But okay, work programme, the last page. For the benefit of new members of the committee, which is most of you, I should mention that what I try and do normally before a meeting is send you an email round the day or two before saying what changes I'm proposing to the work programme, so that you've all had a chance to think about it beforehand. I wasn't able to do that this time, but those of you who were at the training meeting beforehand will have had a preview of what I'm about to say. So these are my proposals, which we need to either agree or disagree with. So in terms of the items to be timetabled, the first three are a hangover from ideas that were floated 12 months ago. The people who floated them are no longer on the committee. Unless anyone really wishes to embrace them and adapt them, I suggest we just let those three go and come up with things that are of concern to the current committee members. The cemetery provision we had a debate on, and we said that we weren't satisfied that the only option was a field near North Waltham, and that we wanted the officers to go away and research certain other possibilities that we indicated for them. And Cabinet made a decision which said that if any of the other sites are either feasible or viable, I can't remember which word they used, I think it was feasible, they would report back to us, but if they weren't feasible, they wouldn't report back to us. So I explained to the portfolio holder that means we don't know whether we're expecting a report, because we don't know whether any of the other sites were feasible or viable. I have been promised a note to all of us that we can make sure is in the public domain somewhere, explaining the work that has been done and the conclusion that none of them are feasible or viable. So we won't be getting a report back on this. The planning application for the proposed site at North Waltham is already in. Obviously, if we're dissatisfied with the explanation of the work that's been done, we can pick that up as a separate item. But for the moment, I suggest we take it at face value that the work's been done, that the others aren't feasible. I mean, from the oral explanations I've had, I'm inclined to think it'll be a convincing report when we get it. So I'm not proposing that we timetable that at the moment. Councillor Day.
I think, you know, bearing in mind the debate that we had at the time, that really the officers should come back and represent the report, and we should look at it, and we should spend a bit of time on it. It's a fairly important point for lots of the people that were here, and lots of the members of the public. So I don't think it should just be, oh well, you know, we've made a decision and that's it. I really think I'd like to know what they've made the decision based on, because there were some good proposals put forward on that day.
I think we will get a report that answers that. We can't actually force a Cabinet member to bring us, and Cabinet have decided that we will get a report if one of the other sites is feasible. So, and the other thing we need to bear in mind is that the option for the site at North Waltham expires the day after our next committee meeting. So I think a decision to exercise it will have to have been made before our committee anyway. So the only, you know, if we were convinced that one of the options needed pursuing, we'd have to convene a special meeting. So let's I suggest we get the report and see it, and if you're dissatisfied with it and want to debate, come back and we will consider whether it's worth having an extra meeting.
To say, I mean, it just makes it a total mockery of having the whole meeting at the first place. If we, you know, the officer was quite anti going back and doing a report, but if he has done it and he's done a good job, I can't see why he can't present it. You know, it just seems that we sat through an hour and a bit of talking about it, and now we're saying, well, you know, might get a report, you might not get a report, and it's all very well and dandy for the cabinet, but I think they should come back. I'm sorry, I think that's what, you know, why bother to debate anything in that case if it's not going to come back to us?
Well, with respect, most things do come back. Sorry, and the first point we had in our training earlier was that we should be focusing on things where we can add value. And having a debate about something after a decision has been made is not adding value. Scrutiny may want to look back at the decision in due course, but I think, you know, unless lots of people agree, I really think there are other more important things to timetable. Unless there is something, as I say, that really concerns us when we get the report as to the work that's been done, I think a debate on it is not going to add value. That's my judgment. Councillor Jones.
Well, time-wise, obviously not, but this brings the whole thing into disrepute, doesn't it? You know, we should. I don't think I was at this committee when this came forward, but if we debate things and nothing comes back, what is the point? You know, it is a pointless exercise. It is an important thing, burial. I was around when they were talking about the crematorium. The disgrace of Basingstoke then was pretty bad. They kept on turning sites down, and we ended up at North Waltham. And it looks to me as if it's been a foregone conclusion, because there's been good arguments from the funeral people to people who are burying their people and cremating their people, why we shouldn't have these places nearer. So I think we should have had that report.
As I said, I don't think it's a waste of time, because we have required the work to be done, and the work has been done. The question is in what form we get a report back on the work that's been done. And as I say, whilst the decision Cabinet made to only bring it back in circumstances was not the decision we asked them to make, but it is the decision they made. I think if we want to fight against it, we should be sure that it's a battle really worth fighting. And let's, in my view, my recommendation is that and I think technically I get the final decision of the work programme anyway, although I'd really much rather do it collaborative if we can, that we don't timetable a discussion on that till we've seen the report on the work that's been done. And then, you know, if you're still unhappy, please get in touch. That's the things that are already on. We need to add to items to be timetabled mental health, assuming that Councillor Cousins will produce for us the piece of paper that, whatever it's called, a work programme suggestion form. It sounded as though there's some worthwhile stuff there. We'll get the form, and if the consensus is that it'll be worth doing some work on, then I think we will probably want a scoping group, and at that point I'll ask who'd like to be on that, and we'll flesh that work out, because I don't think we've got time for it in September or October, so we've got plenty of time to do that. The indoor sports facility strategy and playing pitch strategy, which is on for September, we definitely want to have come back. Then, skipping neighbourhood management for the moment, there are two items on there at the moment: COG4 antisocial behaviour and community safety update. Now, antisocial behaviour, community safety go together. I've also been reminded that we are the committee that is responsible for crime and disorder issues, and we didn't do anything on that last year. So I was, as I said at the previous, I'm minded to give it a bit more thought as to exactly what we want the agenda items to be, but to make that our major focus in September. However, having reached that conclusion, I was then passed a note when I got up here saying that COG4, the proposals are all proposals to be taken forward by officers. None of them involve a portfolio decision, and therefore technically, because our role is to inform policy and decisions of Cabinet, we don't technically have a role in that. However, I'm not terribly happy with that conclusion so far. So if we can just leave it that exactly what we'll do on antisocial behaviour, community safety and crime and disorder in September is to be determined. That's what I would like us to agree as the main focus for our work programme that night. And I'll leave you to work out how to minute that, if that's all right. If we're doing the sports facilities and we're doing possibly 2 or 3 separate papers or one big paper on that, and getting Councillor Tate's now the portfolio for that, so he'll have had time to get up to speed by September, so we'll get him back. I think trying to do neighbourhood management as well. We've done a lot of work on neighbourhood management as the past committee. It's been very useful. The housing associations have been very cooperative. One of them even came to our scoping group. So I'd want to move that to September so we can do it justice. Sorry, move it to October so we can do it justice. Thank you. COG1 soft marketing events, we have asked to come back, and that is on the agenda to come back. So we will keep. We want to know how that soft market testing's gone. And the proposal for smoke-free outdoor areas, again, the committee, that was something this committee started. We've done some work on it, and I think we should have that back. So if you're content, what I propose is that we have the indoor sports facility strategy and playing pitch strategy and a bundle of issues around crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour in September, and neighbourhood management, soft market testing events and smoke-free outdoor play areas in October. And the only and the 2 things on the to be no, that I don't want to put more than 3 on, because if something urgent crops up, it'll be 4 anyway. So 3 is as much as I like to timetable events. So mental health, we can put it in for December now, or we can timetable it as soon as we've got a firm proposal. I don't think it matters. And the other thing is, we were actually offered a LIFT report from the MAP in October. That was also meant to do it tonight. So that would also, that will be 4 items in October anyway. So are you okay with that? With without Councillor Day agreeing that I'm right to acquiesce in the cemetery thing, is everything else are you content with? And we'll go ahead on that basis. Yes, briefly.
I'm not here to upset you, sorry. Can I just ask about, now Councillor Bierman's not with us, who used to champion cycling and that. I noticed in the COG on transport that improved cycling infrastructure and facilities is on there, but it's quite a vague sort of thing. Is that something that we could not look at, about a better provision for cycle routes and maps and making people more aware? You know, we're talking about people get to...
Can I invite you to fill in a work programme suggestion form, and then we, please, because then we will look at it, because we did start 1 or 2 things where we really didn't know what we were doing when we set out, and officers have produced this based on our early experiences. So please, if you could fill that in and circulate it round us, and we all say, hey, actually there's some real useful work here, yes, we'll do it. Yeah. And Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. The proposal for smoke-free outdoor play areas. Now, I would have thought that is almost a statement of the obvious. How much debate does that require?
It's a report back on the work that's been done, I think. There was a lot of its is it being... Well, I think we want to report back because we started the work, and officers... We're feeding into some work Hampshire are already doing and looking at models of work that have been done in other councils. And I think we just want to know that it shouldn't involve a lot of debate, I hope, but we ought, I think, to keep our finger on that particular pulse and make sure it's happening.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, it is to come back. I would have thought we could have probably dealt with that in September, which would have left us with something to do with space for mental health in October.
It's not going to be ready for September, and also I've been reminded in my left ear that, as Councillor Jones mentioned earlier, we've somehow managed to lose food and garden waste. You'll love that. she used to be a portfolio holder. When are we supposed? Is that supposed to be coming back? So that will have to be added to items to be timetabled. Okay, so I mean, I think we've got a full September. September we'll be reviewing the October agenda anyway, so I think that's it. We've only overshot by a minute. Thank you very much, and see you in September.